We all know football season is the greatest time of year, but drafting season's a very close second. So whether you're drinking and drafting with your boys for your annual home league or preparing for your next high-stakes draft, the top priority remains the same: winning, and more specifically, winning money. And what better way to do that than by drafting a beauty? That's why you've got to check out our brand new draft kit at Awesemo.com, created by experts who have profited over $7 million playing fantasy sports. These guys are going to help you crush your drafts this year with tools like the Draft Wingman that's powered by projections from the #1 ranked daily fantasy sports player in the world, Awesemo himself, and includes a one-of-a-kind recommendation engine that takes into account your prior picks to ensure a well-rounded team and optimal draft. Draft Wingman is also outfitted with best ball-specific recommendations, including our stack highlighting feature, which helps you complete your all-important best ball stack. If you're looking for more details, or maybe you're already down to join us for an incredible NFL season, click the following link and use the promo code WR, that's WR, to get the entire draft kit for only $9.95. We'll see you over there. All it took was 3 preseason games and an impressive training camp to make Mac Jones the starter in New England. But shockingly, Cam Newton was released on the very same day before teams had to make their final roster cuts. I'm Dave Lockram with Awesemo.com, and here's why this is huge news for all of the skill players for this New England Patriots team. First off, Cam Newton is an absolute vulture on the goal line. He took away 60% of rushing touchdowns last year and 69% of goal line opportunities among all players. Not to mention, among all rushing attempts on this team, Cam Newton soaked up 25% of them. On the other hand, Mac Jones had 42 total rushing yards at college and 2 touchdowns. He's not someone you have to worry about from a mobility standpoint. He will be a pocket quarterback, and he's going to open things up in a big way for guys like Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, who benefits greatly from Sonny Michel leaving New England to go to L.A. As far as the wide receivers go, you have to like this news for Nelson Aguilar, for Jacoby Myers, and this group of tight ends. I mean, think about it. Mac Jones wasn't electric in the preseason from a putting up glamorous numbers standpoint, but he was 2 for 5 on deep balls, of which the other 3 were either flat out dropped or could have been caught. He has looked sharp. Sure, it was just the preseason, but this is the type of guy that can truly open up an offense. Cam Newton attempted deep balls on only 7.9% of his passes last year and ended up throwing more interceptions than touchdowns on the season. Mac Jones, as the Patriots starter, is going to open things up for the run game and for the passing game, and I'm moving all of these guys, specifically Damian Harris, and in the later rounds, Ramondre Stevenson, up in my rankings as a result.
Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a 12-team PPR mock draft from the first overall spot on Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard. Inside today's video, we're going to be drafting up against the ESPN average draft position, so it's going to be a lot like we are drafting on ESPN inside of today's video. I'm also going to be breaking down each and every single pick I make, the players that I'm thinking about selecting at each spot, as well as the reasoning why I came to the decision to pick each and every single player in the draft, as well as discussing the draft as a whole and how I feel about how things are going. But before we get on in to this 12-team PPR mock draft from the first overall spot, I would like to ask, if you are new to the YouTube channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, me and the guys at the Awesemo Fantasy Football YouTube channel put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I would also like to ask, if you do have a Twitter, to please follow me on there at NotoriousFNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The roster positions for this mock draft are 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, flex, kicker, defense, and 6 bench spots. So let's head into the draft. Now, if you know that you're the #1 overall pick in a 10-team league, a 12-team league, an 8-team league, a 14-team league, whether the league is PPR, half PPR, or standard, you're going to be going into the draft knowing one thing. And that is that you are going to select Christian McCaffrey at the #1 overall pick. Christian McCaffrey has the ceiling to finish as the #1 running back in fantasy football because of the amount of points that It is the Awesemo MLB Deeper Dive and a big MLB slate today. We've got almost every team in action. There was one game that was canceled, but it's not going to really impact us because there's a game that was already not going to be on the slate. As for other weather concerns, there's a little bit of issues in that Phillies versus Nationals game to open up the slate. But as of right now, it doesn't seem to be too massive an issue, but also something that in the coming hours, we're getting a little bit more information on. Of course, MLB Live Before Lock is going to be after us. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel because you want to know when everything we're doing goes live. And we've got so much DFS action going on right now. We've got PGA, MMA, MLB, NFL about to start up soon. So subscribe to the channel so you know when we're covering all the sports as they're about to happen. But first, Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Been a busy NFL day trying to keep up with who's getting cut, adjust, best ball rankings. But other than that, been a pretty relaxing day.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of stuff too. And like you said, not only football, but then also we've got Ben Simmons, who apparently is not going to be reporting to the 76ers. Did you see that weird interview that Danny Green did yesterday?
No, I didn't.
So basically, this was before we even knew that Ben Simmons had said that he wasn't going to show up, but he was doing an interview with, I forget who the reporter was, but anyway, Danny Green had said, he was like, hey, we're not going to have Ben Simmons next year, so we'll see what we get in return for him. I'm going to be the primary defender next year. I was like, well, this is news to me. I didn't know that Ben Simmons was that likely to get traded. And then the next day, it came out that Ben Simmons was going to be reporting to the team. So we'll see. I'm pretty interested to see that as well. But most importantly, we have a baseball slate today. And opening it up, like I said, we have the Washington Nationals at home against the Philadelphia Phillies. Two pretty bad left-handers on the mound in Patrick Corbin and Matt Moore. First, I'm going to ask you, as far as the weather situation goes, how are you handling it right now?
For right now, I'm kind of just keeping an eye on it. Like, it's still too early for me to really care. I'm sure it's going to change. The forecast is going to change between now and lock. So it's definitely the one game where I think you really do need to pay the closest attention. For now, I'm treating it as if the game's going to go, though.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. Obviously, the Reds-Cardinals game, like I said, that's canceled. It wasn't on the slate. But also, if you look at the forecast, that's a game that has 70% chance of rain throughout the entire night. Whereas this Phillies-Nationals game, that game's like 15 to 20% chance of rain later on the day. It seems like if it starts raining, then it becomes pretty problematic because they are catching what I think is like the tail end of the hurricane that's coming through. But whatever, I just go to Google and look at whatever the weather is. But we're going to have to see, like we said, as we go on, how that's going to be updated, what the weather looks like. But assuming the game plays as of now, I'm going to assume we don't like the pitchers here. But what do you like from the offenses?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. I do have some interest in the offenses. Unfortunately, you still don't have JT Realmuto for the Phillies. He would have been one of the top catcher options tonight, but he's not in the lineup. It's a pretty weak lineup. You have, Realmuto out. You have, I don't really know anything about Matt Verling. I'm pulling that up now. But he's 2K, not normally in their lineup. He is almost 25 years old, not ranked as a prospect on FanGraphs. Doesn't seem particularly good. Steamer projects him for an 85 WRC plus. So, not again, just kind of a watered down lineup. You do have Jorge Bonifacio at 2K hitting fifth. That's a value bet you can certainly look to in tournaments. McCutchen, Segura are good options. Overall, though, it's just a really disappointing lineup for Philadelphia. Typically, I would like to attack Patrick Corbin with bats. He has really struggled with right-handed hitters this year, and this is still a right-handed heavy lineup, but I think it's a lot more difficult to prioritize Philadelphia given the lack of good hitters in this lineup.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see where the top stack odds end up being once we get a fresh update. As of right now, exactly properly owned according to our projections, 5% projected ownership, 5% chance being a top stack. So a 0% leverage score. Also, the top stacks tool that is free today over at Awesemo.com. One of my favorite tools to use. Definitely helps me build MLB DFS lineups. So it's free, no reason to not check it out and see what some of the data shows. And we have a question in the YouTube chat about stacking from Brandon Mering, who said he sucks at MLB DFS. Any advice for single bullet entries? I would start by looking at the top stacks tool and just trying to gauge some of the ownership and look at the teams that, have number one, a good chance of being a top scoring team, but also are not picking up an egregious amount of ownership. So particularly for single entries, the first thing I would look at in the top stacks tool is a team like the Toronto Blue Jays, who have a 15.2% ownership share. A lot of people are going to be getting to them. And that's the first team I would cross off and say, like, okay, for single entry, I'm not looking to get there.
generally for single entry, what I would be looking to do is I would be saying, okay, which team has the best chance of being a top stack with also lower ownership? And chances are that's going to be a virtually unowned team in single entry contests. So that's where I think is the best way to use the tools. And that also correlates to me bringing this up just because it's the free tool today to use. So it's a good way to just dive into our data.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. Like, I obviously, like, my process is more in depth than just doing that. But typically, once I go through everything and I end up with my main team, it normally is one of the top teams in the top stack tool that's either projected for similar ownership to their top stack percentage, or projected to be under-owned. Like, for example, tonight, New York, I think, would be the team. The Yankees are a team that I think looks really good for single entry, just because they have a similar chance of success to Toronto, but they're going to be lower owned. If you wanted to go a little bit more off the board, then you get to Colorado, Oakland, teams like that. But yeah, I'm with you. Typically, I'm just going to end up on one of the teams that isn't going crazy over owned and still has a relatively high chance of success.
Yeah, and then on the other side of this game, the Washington Nationals offense, I'm shocked that they're picking up a whole bunch. Maybe shocked isn't the right word. They're going up against Matt Moore. We know that Matt Moore is no good, but the Washington Nationals is one of the most popular stacks on DK. It still just feels a little off to me. I get there's still cheap hitters in this lineup, but I don't want to play this team when we've got everybody in this lineup that's kind of worth rostering, at least from a cheap standpoint, is this popular. Juan Soto's 6,000. He's still picking up some ownership, but I don't know. I want to roster Lance Thomas at 12% ownership, or guys like guys like Carter Kieboom at 8% ownership. So how are you going to be handling the Nationals in a good matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ownership's a little bit concerning, like you said. Most recent update now, we have Lane Thomas at 10%, Zimmerman's at 15%, everyone else below that. But you still have good values here, so I don't think that they're likely to go drastically over-owned. It is also 14-game slate, so I'm a little less concerned with the ownership, just because in most situations it's not going to be 15 to 20% on a bunch of hitters. But typically with a team like Washington, I'll end up using them more as like secondary stacks. So getting, like a 3-man Washington mixed in with a lower owned primary stack, using the value from guys like Robles, Zimmerman, Lane Thomas, assuming they're in the lineup, because it is a good spot against Moore and it is good pricing. It's just, you still want to, there's 28 teams on the slate, 26 if you exclude the 7-inning game. It's still, just really unlikely that a team like Washington ends up being the team that breaks the slate.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel too. It's been a team where I'd like to get to this team for value lately, but my camera turned off for no reason whatsoever.
We can still hear you.
All right, we're back. All right, there we go. I'm almost positive it's Jordan doing that on purpose to screw with me. Jordan definitely just turning it off on his own. That happened the other day before the show started. I know Jordan's tricks. I know he's trying to mess with me. But anyway, hopefully it doesn't happen again in 5 seconds. But let's move on to the next game now. And I was just going to say about the Washington Nationals before my camera turned off. Not that it affects my audio, except it forced me to look away for a second. There's been spots where I'd like to get to the Nationals for value, but it's been the spots where they've had a bunch of cheap hitters who are virtually unowned. Today, those guys are still cheap. They're still bad also, but they're picking up ownership now. So kind of a pass for me. The next game we have on the slate, it is Hyun-Jin Ryu on the mound for Toronto against the Baltimore Orioles. Now, starting with Ryu, he's been crazy inconsistent lately. These are the box scores for Ryu over his last handful of starts. 25 fantasy points, 5, 26, 27, negative 10, 9, 26, negative 3. Considering those kind of results from Hyun-Jin Ryu, how do you approach him as a fairly popular pitcher in GPPs?
Yeah, I mean, it's an okay matchup against Baltimore. It's not the most dangerous offense. They only have a 3.7 implied run total. Still some dangerous bats in this lineup individually, basically from Mullins through Severino. All of these guys are average to above average hitters, but Ryu is a good pitcher in general. Not a lot of strikeout stuff, only a 19.5% strikeout percentage this year, 4 flat xFIP. So the way I view him at a relatively expensive $8,600 salary is that I don't mind getting to him, but he's not a priority for me. Like, there's guys around him that I think look better. Right now, we have him projected for about 12% ownership. I ran a kind of just brief crunch before the show just to get some idea of how I might be ending up, and I only got to about 4% of him in those lineups. So I wouldn't expect to be getting a lot of Ryu here, and the reason is just that he is really similarly priced to Lucas Giolito, and while there is a big ownership gap there, I don't think they're really that comparable. And then there's also some other pitchers that are cheaper than Ryu that I would rather get to. It's just always tough for me to get to a pitcher with a 20% strikeout percentage at 8,600 when he's getting ownership, even if it is a pretty good matchup.
Yeah, and I think the crazy thing with Ryu has just been like which version of him shows up. He only scores like 25 fantasy points or negative fantasy points over the last couple of weeks. So with that in mind, considering that he's getting ownership and more ownership than is warranted per our projections, I like getting Baltimore as a stack here. It's a favorable hitter's park in Toronto. Obviously, this Baltimore lineup it's not terrible against lefties. There is some power in there. Somebody who you've mentioned a little bit recently, somebody like Anthony Santander. He's somebody who has a little bit of upside. Also, Pedro Severino, I always think makes for a good catching option whenever he's cheap and facing a left-handed pitcher. This isn't the highest upside stack on the slate, but we've seen so much inconsistency from Ryu, and the ownership is so low on Baltimore. There's not a single player in this lineup projected more than 0.5% ownership. I think this is a good way to get leverage in tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. Not a team I'd want to go crazy with getting, tons of. Like, I don't think Baltimore ends up being, a top 3 stack or anything for me, but they are projected to have virtually no ownership. And we say it a lot about this team. They just kind of have more power than they get credit for. They, with the exception of Mullins, who's just been fantastic this year all around, they don't get much ownership. They are pretty inexpensive and they do have power. So you also don't have Trey Mancini in the lineup tonight, which on the one hand makes the lineup weaker, but on the other hand, it actually makes the stack a little bit easier because you don't have Mountcastle and Mancini hitting back to back at the same position. You can actually roster 1 through 5 if you wanted to. So I'm with you, not something to get carried away with, but Ryu is getting some ownership and Baltimore does certainly have the ability to hit a few home runs. So not a bad spot, I don't think.
Yeah, and then on the other side with Toronto, currently projected to be the most popular stack of the day. They're projected for 15.2% ownership on DraftKings and over on FanDuel projected for 17.4% ownership. The Blue Jays offense was, as a stack, they were overall okay yesterday, although a lot of the production came from Vlad Jr. So it was kind of more one-offs that worked out. But as for today's slate, once again, it's a good spot for them against Keegan Aiken. I'm just not going to be able to get to them quite as much as the field because this is, once again, going to be a very popular team. And honestly, we have so many teams to choose from, 28 teams in action. You're going to have to get 20+% exposure to the Toronto Blue Jays in order to really get over top of the field. But there is one thing we could do here with Toronto that is a viable option today that hasn't been in some of the other slates we've seen with popular teams. Lourdes Gurriel, he's projected for 4% ownership. Randall Grichuk is projected for 8% ownership. If you are going to stack the Blue Jays, I recommend including some of these guys because they are hitters that have a little bit of upside and they have far less ownership than the rest of the roster.
Yeah, right there with you. I was going to say Toronto's really the one team tonight that I do have major ownership concerns about, but they also are in the best spot on the slate. They have the highest top stack percentage. The thing to keep in mind, and Josh talked about it at length this morning, even when a team is the most likely to have success, you just have to keep in mind how likely they are to fail. Toronto right now with about a 12% chance of being the top scoring stack, that still means 88% of the time they're not going to be the top scoring stack. So typically when you see a team like this getting a lot of ownership, yeah, it's scary because it is a very good matchup. Keegan Aiken's struck out about 17% of right-handed hitters with about a 200 expected ISO this year. So it's a spot that sets up very well for Toronto. They have nearly a 6.5 implied run total. If you could just, if you could get even odds on Toronto versus any other team, you're taking Toronto. But when you in DFS, you basically can just get the field and you're just going to have like a higher percentage of people going to the Blue Jays because they're clearly the best. So in tournaments, typically you're going to shy away. Like you said, where you are getting to Toronto stacks, I think using Gurriel, using Grichuk makes a lot of sense, assuming that they're both in the lineup because they do have power. They both certainly can go out there and give you, a home run, a double, and, 20 plus fantasy points, and they're just not getting as much ownership. So that is one nice thing about the Toronto lineup. A lot of times you get the most popular team and it's like 1 through 6 are all really good hitters and then 7, 8, 9 are bad. And you're really sacrificing upside if you go there. That's not the case with Toronto. You can pretty much get good hitters top to bottom.
Yeah. And those guys at the bottom that aren't picking up ownership, they're not bad hitters. I think Lourdes Gurriel, you and I have probably brought him up as a potential play like 3 times over the last week. And I feel exactly the same about him. So he's somebody who I think all things considered is actually my favorite play in the Toronto lineup today. Next game here on the slate to look at, it is the Detroit Tigers at home against the Oakland A's. Tarik Skubal on the mound for Detroit. And I want to get your take on him as a I added way too many P's in a GPP play, but Tarik Skubal as a GPP play because he's shown a lot of strikeout upside. Obviously, the matchup against the A's is far from ideal, but 26.5% K rate. FanDuel is ridiculously overpriced at $9K, but 7,400 on DK is an SP2 at only 1% ownership. I kind of like getting a Skubal today.
I think he's under-owned in terms of his chances of success versus his ownership. The thing that would keep me from getting much on this particular slate is just that it's going to be so easy to get low-owned hitters when there's 28 teams going. I think I just kind of end up on the more popular pitching and looking to be different with bats. And then on top of that, it's, I think, one of the most difficult matchups he could have. The strikeout stuff is really good for him. He's having a good rookie year overall, 3.95 xFIP, 26.9% strikeout percentage. But you just have this Oakland lineup that is full of right-handed power. It has 8 right-handed hitters plus Matt Olson, who has just hit the hell out of everyone this year, including lefties. So it's not like that's any sort of an advantage for Skubal. And against righties this year, he has a 27.1% strikeout percentage, but he's also allowed a 26.8% strikeout percentage. He's also allowed a 245 expected ISO and a 359 expected WOBA. You get all these good right-handed hitters. You move them out of Oakland and into Detroit. If this were a smaller slate, I'd be more interested in going there because he does certainly have the ability to just rack up strikeouts against anybody. But given how easy I think it's going to be to make low-owned lineups that don't involve him, I doubt that I get to too much because I just have a ton of respect for this Oakland lineup.
Yeah, fair enough. In the build I did before we started the show, I had about 5% Skubal, which not a significant portion, but it's 3x what the field has. And that's a number I don't mind getting to, particularly if you're rostering a team like the Toronto Blue Jays, where number one, you need to save salary, maybe need a contrarian pitching option with some upside. That's where I think Skubal makes a little bit of sense for this particular slate. Now on the other side, Cole Irvin is going to be pitching for Oakland, and it's a really favorable matchup for him against Detroit, but just due to the overall lack of strikeout upside, Cole Irvin's not a pitcher I've generally gotten to, but 6,500 on DK, is that a salary that makes you want to play him at all?
I'm not particularly interested because, like you said, lack of strikeout upside. He's done a pretty good job limiting damage this year. He's held righties to a 322 expected WOBA, 146 expected ISO, but only a 15.1% strikeout percentage against them. And you're just getting an entirely right-handed lineup from Detroit here. So it's not the best righties, but the middle of the order is still fine. Scope, Grossman, Cabrera, Candelario, Eric Haas from 2 through 6. It's not like they are, the Marlins or this version of the Cubs or something like that. And Irvin isn't really someone that gives you a ton of strikeout upside. You also do have some options in that price range that you can go to that I think are either in even better spots or just give you a little bit more strikeout upside. So I don't really see getting to much Irvin here.
Yeah, and then on the other side, as for Detroit, even though I don't think that Cole Irvin is the best pitcher in the world, I don't think he's the second best pitcher in the world either. I don't think he's the second best pitcher in the country. But he's still somebody who's done a good enough job at kind of limiting the damage this year. And the Detroit offense still just kind of sucks. So Detroit today, we only have them with 2.8% chance to be a top scoring team. And it is a team that's picking up a little bit of ownership today. It's not like this is a team that's going unowned, and the hitters that actually matter in the lineup. Eric Haas, who's expensive, picking up 3% ownership. Miguel Cabrera, 4% ownership. So the ownership's already there. It's a spot that I don't really want to get to either side of. I don't like Irvin. I don't like Detroit all that much.
Yeah, it's one of those spots where if this slate were smaller, I could certainly make a case to get to the Tigers here. But with the slate of the size, you kind of just have to start cutting off some of the teams that aren't very good. And I think Detroit fits that bill. And like you were saying, it's not like they're completely unowned and they're not particularly favorably priced either. Miguel Cabrera at 3K is a pretty good price tag, but Grossman's salary is increased to 4,200, Scope's up to 5,300. Candelario is expensive. Haas is expensive. I'm not really trying to make this the Zach Short, Willie Castro, Derek Hill Tiger stack. That seems like it's a very, very low probability stack for this slate. So what the hell was that?
Was that Jordan or was that my camera? I'm gonna say it was Jordan. Yeah, it was Jordan.
I didn't know if I thought maybe I had something up in the background, but yeah, it's just hard to get to a lot of the Tigers here and prioritize them over so many other teams on this slate.
Yeah, so overall, a generally unappealing game for me as far as tournaments go. Now, the next game we have here, it is the Tampa Rays against the Boston Red Sox. Pretty pivotal game in terms of the standings in the American League East. But first, I want to ask you, we have Brad Peacock on the mound for Boston and was just only recently named the starting pitcher for today. I don't think he's going to go all that deep into the game. Brad Peacock, we've seen him play, a few different roles over the course of his MLB career. He's been a closer, he's been a setup man, he's been a long reliever, he's been a starter, he's been an opener. But what do you think his role is going to be today in terms of how many pitches and innings we could get out of him?
So I just quickly wanted to mention, because I don't think I said it specifically, but I do like the A's against Skubal just because they do have so much power. And I also think that as far as top plays of their positions go, Josh Harrison leading off with second base shortstop eligibility looks like a really good value. I think Yan Gomes is the number one catcher option on the slate. So I like Oakland in tournaments, but also even in cash games. I like those two guys in particular. As far as Peacock goes, it was announced about an hour or so that he is expected to get the start. Pulling his stuff up now, he's not showing up on DraftKings for me. Non-probables. I don't think they have him listed as the starter yet, or is he not in the player pool?
Well, also, while you're looking at that, I'm going to bring up his minor league stats. So recent minor league outings for Brad Peacock. He has thrown 5 1/3 and 5 innings in his last two outings. Those were both with Cleveland. One of them came on August 27th, and the other one came on August 21st. So the outings have been staggered a little bit. He seems somewhat stretched out, and a guy who've gotten all kinds of results from in terms of Brad Peacock has been really good. He's been really bad. He's been everything in between. Like I said, he's been a starter. He's been a reliever. Let's see the price on.
He's not in the player pool on DraftKings.
Okay. Well, either way, Matt Peacock is in the player pool, but so Brad Peacock, it still becomes a little bit relevant just in terms of what we think this makes of the matchup the Rays have against him.
Yeah, and at AAA this year, he's gone 34 innings in 11 appearances, 10 starts. Like you said, a little bit more stretched out recently. Still a 5.16 xFIP down there. Strikeout numbers have been good. He's struck out 23.8% of hitters for his major league career. Including start as a starter and as a reliever. He has. Never mind. It's not even aggregated on Fangraphs. He's been kind of inconsistent. You've seen times where he looks really good, then you've seen times where he hasn't pitched in the major leagues now in a couple of years. So I'm not expecting him to be a great option. You do have a 5 implied run total for Tampa Bay in Tropicana Field, which is relatively high. We know this lineup has a lot of upside. Situations like this, I just pay even a little bit more attention to ownership than usual, because I just think there's a lot of volatility here and exactly what we're going to see from Brad Peacock. He could certainly get lit up, and that's probably the most likely situation. But, he has shown the ability in the past to get major league hitters out at a pretty good rate. So right now you're only getting about 1.5% aggregate ownership going to Tampa Bay. I think that's low enough that it makes them a pretty interesting option in tournaments. Not my top team. Like yesterday, I think they were actually my highest owned team. With the extra games on tonight's slate, I don't anticipate that being the case. But I do still think they're going a bit under owned today for the uncertainty of exactly what Peacock's going to give us, and then also just the amount of talent in Tampa Bay's lineup.
Yeah, and by the way, just to bring it up because I have it in front of me, the splits for Brad Peacock as a starter versus reliever over the course of his career, the big difference has really been the strikeout rate. As a starter, he has a 23.3% K rate, but as a reliever, 30.2% K rate. Overall success, he's been a little bit better as a reliever, but not as crazy as you would think given the strikeout difference. 4.29 FIP for his career as a starter versus 3.99 FIP as a reliever. So Brad Peacock still, it seems like there's a whole lot of variance in this spot. For me, that makes the Rays a team I want to get to. I got to the Rays a decent amount yesterday and kind of okay results. It seemed like they should have scored a lot more. They had a whole bunch of innings, but they left runners on base. They had a situation where they bases loaded and 1 out in the bottom of the 7th or the bottom of the 8th, and they weren't able to convert on that. But the Rays, once again, a team that we do have fairly positive leverage today, 1.6% projected ownership, 3.7% chance to be a top stack. They are a pretty high priority team for me, even though this is a pitcher-friendly park. Now, on the other side, Ryan Yarbrough against Boston. Yarbrough overall is good enough to where I don't really want to go crazy with Boston, especially because they're fairly expensive. But this is a team that is positively leveraged. So what are you going to be doing with Boston as a stack?
Yeah, I don't think it's a great spot against Yarbrough. They do have a 4.1 implied run total, which is pretty low for this team. They are in the middle of the pack in terms of top stack percentage, very similar to Tampa Bay, getting virtually no ownership. It's just a really similar situation, I think, to yesterday when we talked about it, where, yeah, I don't think it's very likely that Boston has a great game here against Yarbrough. He's just kind of an okay pitcher. The park isn't great for hitting, but at the same time, at least the middle of this order, you can kind of say what you want about the bottom with Vasquez and Jonathan Arauz and Jairo Munoz, but Schwarber, Martinez, Bogarts, Devers, Verdugo, Dahlbeck to some extent, it's still competent hitters and they're getting no ownership. So would have more exposure on a smaller slate. As is, I probably get over the field in the sense of, they're projected for 1% ownership, but I don't anticipate them being a top 5 stack for me.
Yeah, like once again, if you get to any Red Sox stacks, you're probably overweight to the field. It's just a still low priority for me. It's still a fairly tough matchup against Ryan Yarbrough when you consider that, number one, he's an okay pitcher. 2, it's a strong pitcher's park. And then number 2, also, Boston's really expensive, and that kind of makes it a little bit prohibitive in terms of the guys that I actually like. But that aside, overall, just something that I think if you get to a couple of them over the course of 150 lineups, that's fine, but I wouldn't prioritize them in single entry, 3 max, or 20 entry, or anything like that. Next game on the slate, we have Trevor Williams on the mound for the Mets. It is Edward Cabrera on the mound for the Marlins. Now, first, I'm going to say this is only it's a doubleheader, so 7-inning game right off the bat on a 14-game slate. That just takes the offense out of consideration for me.
Yeah, same here. Like I said, I said it with Josh this morning. I'm not saying, definitely just have zero. Like if you get to a little bit, like if you're playing 150 lineups, for example, and you get to a little bit of like Nimmo or Alonso or Conforto, it's whatever. Like they're basically going to lose 1.5 at bats. But when you start talking about the entire team as a stack, it's pretty difficult to take 2 innings off of a game when there's 26 other teams playing and expect them to come through often enough to be worth it. So from a stacking standpoint, really no interest. Individually, still very limited interest, but you at least do still have a little bit of favorable pricing on the Mets.
And then starting for the Marlins, I'm pretty interested in Edward Cabrera overall. He has really weird results from his first start of the season. If you just looked at it from the eye test, he throws really hard, 97.2 average fastball velocity in his first start of the season. It didn't equate to any kind of swing and misses. So actually an 8.3% strikeout rate, 12.5% walk rate. In terms of earned runs, he was so cheap on that slate, they ended up producing pretty good fantasy results. But the underlying numbers were not particularly good in that game. 10.87 expected ERA, 8.53 FIP. Going forward, I really like Edward Cabrera, but for this particular spot, I'm still a little undecided what I actually want to do with him. Do you view him as a viable value play?
I think he's viable, yeah, just in the sense that he has really good stuff. He's 6,400. There's not a whole lot of cheap pitching to feel confident in today. On the other side of this game, you have Trevor Williams, who is in a good matchup, but there's legitimate questions about how deep into the game he's going to go. You have Cabrera basically at this price point, and then you start looking, cheaper. You have Jordan Lyles, who has his own issues. You have Jacob Junis. There's no real cheap guy that stands out as a top option. So just knowing that Cabrera threw 78 pitches last game, he went 6 1/3. He was lights out in the minor leagues this year. He has really good stuff. You can certainly make the case to get to him at 2% if you're paying down a pitcher just based on talent.
Yeah, and once again, he's cheap, and relative to some of the other options here, he does kind of rate out decently for us. We have him with a 17.1% chance to be one of the top 2 value pitchers on the slate on DraftKings. FanDuel, no reason to FanDuel, he's not even on the slate, so even more reason not to consider him because the game isn't there. But anyway, the type of pitcher I wouldn't be looking to consider on a single pitcher site. But 6,400 on DK, I think I'm probably going to get more than the 0.8% the field is at right now. But once again, that's a pretty low barometer. I'm also just going to refresh my data because I'm not sure if I'm looking at the most recent run of ownership. Yeah, because I heard you say 2%, and yeah, 2.2% now for Edward Cabrera. I had him at 0.8% in the last run of ownership. But yeah, that aside, if I get to a few lineups of Cabrera, I don't mind it. But other than that, this is not a game that I really have that much interest in. Next game on the slate, and this is one that I think is going to bring up some interesting talking points. And I also want to refresh the offensive data here, which, by the way, the top stack score, that is free over at Awesemo.com today. And one thing that really stands out when you look at this is the Colorado Rockies, who are playing today against the Texas Rangers in Texas. Jordan Lyles on the mound for the Rangers. We have the Colorado Rockies as a massively positively leveraged team, a situation that we've seen quite a bit from Colorado as of late. An offense I don't really like, but we have them in a situation against Jordan Lyles. Lyles has generally been bad this year. They only have a 2% projected ownership. Well, what are you going to be looking to do with this team? Because I feel like I've been at odds with our top stacks tool for a little bit about the overall quality of the Rockies, but I do feel obligated to keep getting to them when they're so low owned and we haven't projected fairly well.
Yeah, same boat here. Like I personally don't think Colorado's the fourth most likely team to be the highest scoring stack. But at the same time, they're kind of just lumped into this group of like 10 teams that are, between like 3 and 5%. So I agree that like it's a pretty good spot against Lyles. It wouldn't be shocking if the Rockies do well. I just think they should be a little bit lower. But really the way I view this game is that you have a pitcher in Lyles who isn't very good. You have the Rockies offense who is absolute garbage outside of Coors Field. But one side probably comes through. Like typically when you see a bad pitcher and a bad offense, one of them just does what they do. And these are the Rockies are awful and Lyles really outproduces a $5,200 salary, or Lyles is awful and the Rockies actually have a good game. So I kind of just think with neither side getting ownership, if you are playing multiple lineups, it's a pretty interesting spot to just be overweight on both. You don't have to go crazy and have 20% Rocky stacks or 20% Lyles or anything like that. But Lyles at only 5,200 does open up some stuff for you. If you're trying to get to like the Blue Jays, for example, Lyles is one guy that you could use because one, you can get to the salaries, and two, he's only projected for about 3% ownership. So I think. Or sorry, 1% ownership, 3% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So, I think like that's one way you could differentiate. It's just a spot where I'm not going to have confidence in either side, but one of them kind of has to win out.
Yeah, and I just because of our data, I tend to favor the Rockies a little bit, and I'm going to hit you with the player prop bet right here also, which is one of the top overall values right now in our player props tool. Another thing that's free to use over at Awesemo.com. And is a really useful resource if you're looking to place any kind of bets. Player prop bets, also our power rankings tool that gives overall odds on teams winning games and the expected ROI on bets. One of the best bets we have on the board today, it is under 5.5 strikeouts for Jordan Lyles. 5.5 seems a little high for me. It is something we have with a 32% ROI to bet the under on. So I'll ask you, what do you make of 5.5 strikeouts for Jordan Lyles?
That seems like a lot. Even though it is the Rockies outside of Coors, it just seems like a lot because you're kind of just assuming that Lyles is going relatively deep into this game, which, he certainly could here, but that kind of, it just seems a little bit higher than I think like 4.5 would probably be a good line.
Yeah, that's probably if it was 4.5, we'd have it as just a neutral bet in our tools, but just because the number is at 5.5, it's a number that he's not hit very frequently this year. He's hit, 6 or more strikeouts, looks like 4 times since May 28th. It's just, he's not a prolific strikeout pitcher. And like you said, he generally doesn't work all that deep into games. There's been a couple times this year, or 4 times this year, he's pitched 7 innings, but his recent outings, 3 2/3 innings against Cleveland the last time out. Then that start against Boston, where he went 7, but 6, 5 1/3, 5 2/3. There's been a lot of times where he hasn't really been extended into games this year, and also being a guy with a fairly low strikeout rate, under 5.5. That is a bet that I placed earlier in the day. So, like you said, though, Jordan Lyles, due to his low ownership and low price point, I think for GPPs, it's a fine spot to have a little bit of exposure to both sides. On the other side of the game, Austin Gomber is going to be pitching for Colorado. Gomber's a pitcher that I have rostered quite a bit, even at Coors Field this year. This matchup against Texas is a pretty favorable one. Gomber also, it's a pretty good price point for an SP2 today, 8,200. He's pick up a little bit more ownership than I'd like at 12.8%, but is he somebody you think you're going to end up getting to?
Yeah, the ownership still, like, it was 9% this morning. Now it's up to 12.8%. I like Gomber. I like the matchup. At his salary, I'm just a little surprised the ownership's as high as it is, but I do think he's a good pitcher. Outside of Coors this year, he has about a 25% strikeout percentage. He's been someone that I'm happy to roster in Coors when he's inexpensive. And then now you get this good matchup against the Rangers. So a little surprised at the ownership. I still wouldn't mind if I get to that 10 to 12% range. I guess, that's where around where I think he should be. I was just a little bit surprised that he's actually expected to pick it up. So I don't think that there's like really an edge in going overweight on Gomber, but I think that like between Gomber and Ryu, I don't think there's a really big difference. Right now, they're projected for about the same ownership. This morning, you had Ryu pulling more than Gomber. So I do agree, with the field, I guess, that Gomber should be getting about the same ownership as Ryu.
I'll ask you for cash games. I guess it's going to be a non-factor. I was going to say if you had to roster either Gomber or Ryu, but the answer for me is just going to be neither of them. So I think it's
the answer is just going to be Giolito.
Yeah, it's the answer is neither for me anyway. But it'll be interesting. We talk about some of these more pitchers and where we would go in cash games as we move along. But going against Austin Gomber with the Texas Rangers, any individual hitters that stand out to you that might want to get to?
Not really. Adolis Garcia, I think, is still cheap for the amount of power that he has, but Gomber is just somebody that I don't really feel the need to pick on, especially with an offense that overall is as weak as the Rangers. So, if you're someone looking at a lineup right now that has a $2,700 Yanni Hernandez leading off, like I wouldn't change it, but it's not somebody that I'm actively seeking out.
All right. The next game we have here to look at, it is a game that, at least for me, I don't have a massive amount of interest in. Jake Junis at home against the Cleveland Indians. And then we have Zach Plesac on the mound for Cleveland against the Royals. Junis, not a particularly good pitcher, but Cleveland on the other side is not a particularly good offense. The ownership here exactly even. We have a 3.6% projected ownership share for Cleveland with a 3.6% chance to be a top stack. Is there anything from this game to you that really stands out? Because this to me just looks like a whatever to me.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. Cleveland's getting the ownership that it looks like they deserve. Junis is someone that previously in the major leagues I actually had some interest in, just because I've always thought he should be a little bit better than he is, but he's never really put it together. He's been at AAA for the last couple of months. He's had a couple of good starts recently. From a length perspective, his most recent start, he went 4 1/3. August 25th. He went 3 innings on the 19th. So I'm not expecting him to go too deep into this game. I don't really see the need to get to him. I think if I'm going to that price range, I would rather go to Jordan Lyles. For the Indians, certainly never going to say not to roster Ramirez or Reyes. You do get a really cheap Bradley Zimmer. You get a cheap Bobby Bradley back in the lineup. So I think it's an okay stack, but they are getting some ownership. So kind of just don't feel strongly one way or the other.
Yeah, and then on the other side with Zach Plesac, he's, a quality enough starting pitcher, but he's pretty expensive today, and he just doesn't generate very many strikeouts. So Zach Plesac, in terms of what his actual upside is, to me, it's fairly non-existent at this price point. He struck out over 6 hitters once the entire season. That came on August 13th against the Tigers. Other than that, he's a guy who very consistently kind of scores like 10 to 13 fantasy points. Low owned, but I think for a good reason.
Yeah, I mean, I said that I didn't like rostering Ryu at this price point because he only strikes out 20% of hitters. Zach Plesac has a 16% strikeout percentage, 4.69 xFIP, 1.68 home runs per 9 this year. Kansas City's not a very good offense, but they also actually don't strike out a lot, especially the top of this order. I would actually have a little bit of interest in them just because Plesac has given up power this year, 223 expected ISO to righties, 190 to lefties. Kansas City is projected for some ownership, though, just because they are so inexpensive. Salvador Perez, always one of the top catching options. And then you just get, a $4,400 Merrifield, Lopez at $3,100, Santana, $2,700, Benintendi, $3K. So they're going to just show up often enough because of their pricing where, out of 150 lineups, I might have, 3% or something Kansas City, but in 3 max or 20 max or single entry, they're not a team I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think individually as a catcher play, you pointed out Salvador Perez. We've got people in the YouTube chat who are already predicting the Salvador Perez homer because that seems to be all he does. Let's see, when is the last time Salvador Perez didn't homer? It was August 24th against the Houston Astros. By the way, this has been a road trip, and they played in some favorable hitters parks. So they just played a 4-game series against the Seattle Mariners in Seattle, and Perez homered in every single game in that series. So it has been a while since Salvador Perez did not have a good game. He is one of the top overall hitting catchers in baseball. Certainly is the best power hitting catcher in baseball. Now, seemingly out of nowhere that he's developed this kind of power. So as an individual catcher, one-off play, as long as you have the salary for it, no issue going to Salvador Perez. You don't have to jam him into lineups, but he's rightfully picking up a decent amount of ownership from the catcher spot.
Yeah, I guess actually it is worth mentioning, I guess, because I said that the stack was, picking up ownership. This is actually one of those situations where Perez is the only guy getting double-digit ownership. So if you stack, you're actually more contrarian when you play Salvador Perez, probably if you stack him with Kansas City than if you just use him as a one-off. I'm not saying that's the only way you should play Perez, but I guess it does make the stack as a whole a little bit more appealing to me when you look at the ownership projections individually. You have Perez at 10%, Merrifield at 6%, and then Santana's at 3%, and nobody else is higher. So I guess a little bit more interested in Kansas City. Again, not a top stack for me by any stretch, but a little bit more interested in them when you actually look at the breakdown of where the ownership's going.
All right, now the next game here, we get to talk about one of the best overall pitching options on the slate. Now we're starting to get to some of the games where we have some real legitimate pitchers that we have to talk about. This is going to start with Lucas Giolito at home against the Pittsburgh Pirates. I know you talked about Giolito a little bit before, and it's been a little bit of a disappointing season from Giolito relative to some of the recent results we've seen from him. He was a guy who coming into the year, I think he had the 4th best Cy Young odds in the American League, and he certainly has been that caliber of pitcher. But still overall, fairly good results, 3.68 ERA, 3.36 expected ERA. The strikeout rate of 28.3% is still very good, but it's not quite the 33% K rate he had the last 2 years. So in this spot against the Pirates, it's still hard to not look at Giolito as an elite starting pitcher because even if his numbers have dropped off, they're still good, and the Pirates offense is just terrible.
Especially on DraftKings where 1, you need 2 pitchers, and 2, Giolito is just at a price point that makes no sense. Like when you look at the other top tier options, you have Walker Buehler at $1,700 more expensive against Atlanta. Brandon Woodruff is $600 more against San Francisco. McCullers is $1,300 more against Seattle. So the pitchers, and Morton is $100 more, but facing the Dodgers. So the pitchers that have like a similar skill set or similar talent level to Giolito are either more expensive and or they're in a really, really tough matchup. Then you get Giolito at this price down, $8,800 mark against one of the worst offenses in baseball. He's projected to be the highest owned pitcher on the slate at 38%. But when you factor in the savings, you have 29% going to Woodruff, you have 20% going to Buehler. When you factor in the savings and the matchup, I anticipate just getting over the field on Giolito. Obviously, this didn't work out at all. The last time we talked about this, we had a similar situation with Lance Lynn the other day against the Cubs. He went out and gave up like 7 earned runs or something just absolutely absurd to that team. It's still baseball. It still can fail. But the way I view it, I think that there's actually, especially also because you have so many offenses to choose from, so many low-owned hitters that you can use, I think it's going to be easier just to kind of just say, okay, I'm taking a stand on Giolito here. If Giolito has a bad start, whatever, I'll have a bad night. I'm fine with that. I think that'll be my approach. You certainly could make a case, some people do play more contrarian than I do in tournaments, and they're just going to say, I'm not going to a 40% owned pitcher. I'll go elsewhere. I think that's fine. It kind of just comes down to your strategy. For me, I'm fine going with Giolito here. I will say in cash games on DraftKings, if you find someone not playing Giolito, just play against them more often in the future.
Yeah, so I think Giolito is the first pitcher that I put into a cash game lineup. Then it gets really dicey after that because I don't really know what to make of the next tier of play. Well, I wouldn't say next tier because Walker Buehler, in terms of overall pitcher quality, isn't a tier of his own, but he's a very tough matchup against Los Angeles. Same goes for Brandon Woodruff against San Francisco. Then Blake Snell is actually picking up the second most ownership on the slate, but who could feel good about Blake Snell at all this year, particularly when he's on the road? So we'll talk about more of those pitchers as we come up, but Giolito, to me, is the safest overall cash option. If you're playing on FanDuel, a single pitcher site, I would say play Lucas Giolito at 10, even though he's a little more expensive, 10,200. I think he's the cash game guy to play on FanDuel. DK, he'd be the first pitcher that I put in, and then we'll figure out as we go who the other pitchers should be. But on the other side, with all the ownership going to Giolito, I know the Pirates suck, but any interest in a leverage stack there?
Not really. I kind of said the same thing with Josh this morning. Like I was just saying about Giolito, there's some people that are good, that play more contrarian than I do. There's some people that are good that look for negative correlation, even on larger slates, a bit more than I do. For me, on a slate of this size, Pittsburgh's just not really going to pop up. If it were a 4-game slate, a 5-game slate, I'd be a lot more interested. But I'll just, find low-owned teams. And if Pittsburgh actually does win this slate, I just probably won't be there. But again, it's kind of comes down to risk tolerance. It comes down to your personal strategy. If your strategy is one that's a bit more contrarian, this is certainly a spot that is going to look very good because Giolito is getting so much ownership. Like I said, though, for me, it's just not where I anticipate getting to.
Yeah, and then as for the White Sox offense, they have a really good matchup here against Bryce Wilson. They're also at home, so it's a favorable hitter's park. But this is another team that's just picking up a whole bunch of ownership for a big slate. So we have the Chicago White Sox, 11.4% ownership with a 7.9% chance to be the top scoring team of the day over on DraftKings. Then on FanDuel, we have the White Sox, a little bit over-owned, not quite to the same degree, but a 9% ownership share. Both sites, this team looks over-owned. Getting to them, I still think it's reasonable if you're playing a bunch of lineups, but I just prefer to be underweight to them.
Yeah, they are kind of similar to Toronto, though, where there's a lot of guys on this team that actually aren't getting that much ownership. And the aggregate ownership's also skewed a little bit on DraftKings because Luis Roberts 4,200, which is just a pretty crazy price tag compared to the rest of this team. So he's getting 20% ownership. Then you have Anderson, Abreu, and Jimenez getting around 13 to 14%. After that, nobody's above 9%. So you can still stack this team, get a pretty good stack. Like you can go Moncada, Vaughn, Grandal, and then 2 of the more popular guys. And you still have a pretty low owned Chicago stack in a good spot against Bryce Wilson. He's not a particularly good pitcher. You do have a 6 implied run total here for the White Sox. So it is one spot where I would say I think I do really like the spot for them. And then also the middle or like the bottom part of the order isn't pulling as much ownership as the top.
Yeah, there are ways for, especially because the slate is this size, there are ways to differentiate a little bit. Like you said, guys at the bottom of the order, or even the middle of the order, Yohan Moncada, 8% ownership. That's fairly low for a team that when they're going to be a popular stack, at least the hitters around him. And then we've got, Cesar Hernandez at the bottom of the order, 5%, Andrew Vaughn, also 8%, Lori Garcia, 2%. So there are ways to mix and match some of those other guys to differentiate a little bit. And like I said, it is a good matchup against Bryce Wilson, but on the whole, not a, yeah, go ahead.
I'll say I do also. So we haven't refreshed our ownership projections since this lineup came out. I think the aggregate ownership on the White Sox is going to drop in the next update because Tim Anderson's not in the lineup. He just, pulls a lot of ownership because he's a shortstop. So when you're replacing him, it's like you have Brian Goodwin in the lineup that we didn't have projected to be in. Goodwin at 3,400, I think is a good value, but I would be shocked if Brian Goodwin, in the outfield on a 14-game slate is pulling the same amount of ownership that Tim Anderson is.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I've just been refreshing the ownership page, but I didn't notice that it hadn't been updated since the lineup came out. But also, more of this information is going to come. As for the top stacks tool, that is free today. So even if you guys are not an Awesemo subscriber, check out the top stacks tool. You can see what some of our data is all about, and you can refresh that when it comes. Also, MLB Live Before Lock is coming up after us. They'll be able to dig into some more of the data also, and they'll have a little bit more recent information also, just because they're going to be on the show closer to lock. So like this video, also subscribe to the channel, and you'll get all more updated information as we get closer to lock. Next game that we have here to talk about, it is the Minnesota Twins against the Chicago Cubs. And boy, this has got to be the worst pitcher versus offense matchup I think we've seen the entire year. It is John Gant on the mound for Minnesota, the Chicago Cubs against him on the other side. Everything sucks, but sometimes that kind of leads to upside for tournaments.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Lyles and Rockies situation, I think. Gant has thrown 68 and 61 pitches in his last 2 starts. That's good. He hasn't been good in either of those. 4 earned runs in each start, 3 1/3 innings and 4 innings. His strikeout numbers aren't very good for the season. As a starter, he has a 17.5% strikeout percentage, 5.27 xFIP. The Cubs only have a 4.5 implied run total, which when you're going up against John Gant kind of speaks to how bad the Cubs are right now. They are projected to only get about 2% ownership. We actually have them with a 4.5% chance of being a top stack. So kind of like the Rockies, I don't feel good about getting to the Cubs, but I do also think they're projected to go a little bit under-owned here against Gant.
And they're cheap. Like you could play there's a couple things you can do with the Cubs. Number one, you have them in your lineup. I know then Patrick Wisdom's kind of expensive, but everybody else in the lineup, you get a bunch of guys in here. Jason Hayward, 3,200. Chirinos, the catcher, he's 3,200. Ortega's leading off at 4,100. Frank Schwindel is batting second at 3,200. You could roster the Cubs. You don't have to be worried about ownership because people generally aren't playing them. And you could pay up for whatever pitchers you want. So you go 5-man Cubs stacks, pay up for, you like Walker Buehler today, you like Lucas Giolito, play them at pitcher, and not really concerned. I mean, as bad as John Gant is, I get the Cubs suck too, but I kind of like the Cubs as a stack today. It doesn't make me comfortable to say it, but this is a team as far as cheap stacks go. I have a decent amount of interest, and we have them with a 7.2% chance of being the top value stack of the day. The only team that's above that number, only 2 teams are or at least on FanDuel, the Phillies and the Yankees are the only 2 teams with a better chance of being a value stack over on FanDuel. Like I said, also they're fairly cheap on DK. I like the Cubs today, and not that you have to play a lot of them, but if you play 3 or 4% Cubs stacks, that's something I like for today.
Yeah, they just, look like a team. To me, it's really similar to the Rockies. Like, I think, of course, there's a very good chance they fail. But again, when you're talking baseball, like there's a very good chance any of these teams fail. There's a very good chance Toronto fails, even though they're in the best spot on the slate. That's just how baseball works. So it's more about in tournaments, putting yourself in a position for the biggest payoffs when things go well for you. And Chicago certainly gives you the opportunity to do that here at very low ownership.
Yeah, and then on the other side, Zach Davies is going to be starting for the Chicago Cubs. I rarely ever roster Zach Davies because of his lack of strikeout upside, but I'm not going to be playing the Minnesota Twins. Over the last 30 slates we've had on DraftKings, I want to say the Twins have been one of the most overowned offenses on like 25 of them. And today, 11.6% projected ownership share going to Minnesota, 4.4% ownership, 4.4% chance of being a top stack. Given that information, I can't reasonably want to stack the Twins, but is that enough for you want to play Zach Davies for leverage at all?
Not enough for me to get to Davies. Just don't see the strikeout upside there. And he's not cheap. It would be a little bit different if he was in that like $6,500 range. I think Minnesota is one of the best teams in cash games. Byron Buxton should be on your short list, especially, DraftKings at 3,200. That's just a mispricing. Josh Donaldson's one of the top third base options. I think Polanco is one of the top second base options. And then you could even make a case for Kepler in the outfield. He's not someone that I anticipate having, but it's still a reasonable price point. But that typically is like the first sure sign that a team's going to get a lot of ownership in tournaments is when you sit down and say, okay, I'm just going to crunch my best lineups and see what they look like. And they're coming up as like mini twin stacks. It typically tells you that's going to be the case. So it is a good spot against Davies. I think you do have some very good plays from Minnesota. It's just a situation where when you play them in tournaments, you want to be making sure that you balance them out with low owned pitching or low owned primary stacks alongside them. And typically I'm just not going to get as much of them as the field. I'm not saying don't play any Minnesota. They're some of the best value plays on the slate, but just be very aware of what the rest of your lineup looks like.
Yeah, and what are you going to be doing with Byron Buxton overall in tournaments? Just from a standpoint of 32.6% ownership, that is a massive number for somebody on a 14-game slate. So cash games, I think he's the number one hitting play for cash games today, really without much of a second thought. But for tournaments, how are you going to be looking to mix him in when he's this popular?
So in the dummy crunch I did before the show, which isn't completely indicative of what I'll do, but it gives me some idea. He still ended up in like 26%, which is slightly underweight, but pretty close to the field. And I'm fine with that just because he is such a ridiculously good value. You can always, whenever a hitter is like 30+% owned in tournaments, it's not a mistake to get away from them because they're just going to fail so often. But again, it does also come back to the rest of your lineup. And so it just kind of seems like I'm not having any trouble getting low owned lineups and then just saying, yeah, okay, Byron Buxton fits in here.
Yeah, it's for sure. Like if you're making, you probably don't need the salary savings in a Cubs stack, but let's say you are making a stack of, let's see, who are one of the Rockies. Yeah, that's a team where it doesn't matter. Or if you're paying up to be contrarian, like what's a positive leverage stack today? One that are the Yankees. Oh, the Yankees are over-owned now, so never mind. If you're playing the Dodgers, right? The Dodgers are a team that only project for 1.1% ownership, but they have a 2.8% chance to be a top stack. That's a team you might need some salary savings to be able to make the stack work. And you're already rostering a lower owned stack in the Dodgers. That's a team where I think that it would really make sense to be getting to Byron Buxton. So that's kind of the context where I think he makes most sense for tournaments. But overall, it's pretty tough to swallow 33% ownership share in tournaments. If you're going to be getting over the top of them, you have to have them in like 40% of your lineups, which, that's difficult to think that any one hitter is that kind of odds of success. Next game we have here, it is the Yankees against the Angels. Jameson Taillon is going to be on the mound for the Yankees, and he's picked up a little bit of ownership as the day's gone on now. So time we're looking at double-digit ownership. The spot against the Angels, we've talked about them a little bit now. They've added guys like Marsh and Adele to the back end of the lineup. It's increased the potential for strikeouts. So what do you like about, or what do you like or dislike about Jameson Taillon here?
I kind of like the matchup, and I also like the salary. He's getting some ownership now, a bit more than he was getting this morning at about 12%, but I think he's just a little bit underpriced in the context of this slate when you have to pay $8,600 for Hyunjin Ryu. You have to pay, $8,200 for Gomber. Not that I think Gomber is bad or anything. It's still an almost $1,000 discount to get to Jameson Taillon, who for the season, he's had some issues, but he's got a 23.5% strikeout percentage. The Angels, we don't know if Ohtani is going to be in the lineup. We know they scratched him as the pitcher, but even if he is, you're still talking about a lineup where you kind of just have to navigate around Ohtani. Jared Walsh is good, but he'll strike out. Upton strikes out. Marsh, Stassi, Adele, these guys all strike out. It's just a situation where, Jameson Taillon has some flaws, but I think the salary reflects them. And we'll talk about this when we get to Blake Snell. I feel similarly about him, where DFS still just comes back to salary and ownership being the primary components. And if you're going to take a pitcher and say, oh, well, he's risky for this, and this reason, so we're going to shave $1,000 off of his salary, it just kind of leaves you with a lot more upside than downside. And given that he's not getting tons of ownership, I'm definitely interested in him.
Yeah, and then on the other side, the Angels, a team that I'm not really going to be looking to get to, especially not their pitcher, Jaime Barria. Going up against the Yankees offense, Barria has been pretty bad for an extended period of time. If I'm not mistaken, I think at the top of the show when we first started, the Yankees were a little bit under-owned. Now they've picked up a lot more ownership. They now have 11.4% ownership as a team. That puts them in lockstep with the Chicago White Sox and Minnesota Twins, but a step behind the Toronto Blue Jays. It's now a Yankees offense that's become fairly popular. What are you looking to do with them as a stack?
I still think I'll get a pretty good amount just because they're not getting crazy ownership. Most of this team is in that like 10 to 12% range. Stanton's only at 8%. Urshela's at 8%. Anthony Rizzo's driving the ownership the most, $3,800 first baseman. I think pretty much the answer at first base in cash games on DraftKings. In tournaments, though, I mean, if you make a Yankee stack and don't have Rizzo, or you make a Yankee stack with Rizzo, but you use like Jordan Lyles or something like that, you're still going to be fine. I think it is a good spot. Jaime Barria just hasn't been good for a while, and we know the Yankees have tons of power in this lineup. They're also affordably priced, I think, in part because their pricing's just been too cheap in general lately, and then also they were supposed to be facing Shohei Ohtani today, so you're getting a really underpriced Yankees team that they are pulling ownership right now, but one of the best spots on the slate, and compared to Toronto, not pulling nearly as much.
Yeah, and that's true. Also, it's not quite the same ownership that Toronto's getting. I'm also trying to look at the individual hitters in the Yankees. I'm looking to refresh. Is there anybody in here that stands out as being too low owned as an individual hitter versus what you think they should be?
I think Stanton is one. Like, he's getting 8% ownership, which is fine, but that's one of the lower owned guys on the Yankees. Gio Urshela at 3,300, assuming he's in the lineup at third base, is a good value who's only pulling about 8% ownership as well. So those guys, plus you have a 2K flat, Andrew Velasquez, who I don't think he's nearly as good as he's been playing lately, but he's 2K flat on a team with a 5.5 implied run total, getting like 4% ownership at a pretty weak shortstop position. Certainly somebody you can use just to kind of knock down the overall ownership of your lineups.
All right, moving on to the next game now, and this is one that is a really interesting talking point for me. Blake Snell. I have no clue what to make of him today. He's been pitching much, much better as of late, although still, if you look at his numbers for the year, absolutely crazy home road splits, or really over the entirety of the year, he's pitched fairly well in San Diego. But you put Blake Snell on the road, and it's just been issues for him this season, and his splits for the year. So at home, he's a 2.79 FIP. On the road, 5.76 FIP for Blake Snell. His strikeout rate, 35.6% at home, 24% on the road. His walk rate, 10.1% at home, 15.7% on the road. So I don't know what to make of Blake Snell. He's really popular today, and he's been super high variance this year. So my inclination is just to get underweight to the field on him in tournaments. But if he blows up today, and -5 fantasy points for Blake Snell wouldn't surprise me. 40 fantasy points today from Blake Snell would not surprise me. So what are you doing with him? I have no clue what to expect.
I think given his price tag, and I'm talking DraftKings because of the two pitcher site, it's a lot different on FanDuel, where for one, he's $9,400, and for two, you need one pitcher. On DraftKings, I think the field's pretty much got it right. We haven't projected close to 40% ownership. The way I view this, and I referenced it when we talked about Tyon, there are significant issues that make Snell risky any given day. He walks too many guys. He's inefficient with his pitches. We have seen him throw a lot more pitches recently. He's thrown at least 100 pitches in 4 of his last 5 starts. He threw 122 pitches last time out, which, on a side note, if you are looking for reasons not to play Blake Snell today, that's always a little bit concerning when you have a guy coming off that many pitches. But you're seeing him, be allowed to kind of work himself through his inability to throw strikes, and also just that he just wastes so many pitches because he strikes guys out and he walks guys. Your pitch count gets elevated, but you can feel a little bit better going to him now, I think, because he's not getting pulled at, like 90 pitches after the 4th inning or anything. He's getting a chance to get you 5+ innings. So that's always good, but it's mostly just that the salary reflects all of his issues. Arizona's been a good team against left-handed pitching this year, but that's still a pretty small sample size, and they've been so bad overall. I think this is a favorable matchup. Snell has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 29.7%. He's got a 3.85 xFIP. It's just, this is a pitcher that, if you're talking in terms of his upside, what he can do in terms of strikeouts, he's a $9K or $9,500 pitcher. So when you make him 7,700, you're kind of just saying, okay, we're going to take away a lot of the risk here, and we're going to just give you the upside. Because, not to say Snell, he could go get that -5 game. It happens, but that's kind of the case for everybody. It's in a lot of his bad starts where you're disappointed, he's still going to get you like 14 fantasy points because he's going to go 5 innings, give up 3 earned runs, and strike out 6 guys or something. So at 7,700, it's relatively difficult for him to actively hurt you. It's relatively easy for him to just, be someone you need to have. I don't think there's anyone around him in price that is that comparable in terms of upside. Zach Gallen on the other side of this game, I think, is probably the closest because he does have a 27% strikeout percentage this year, but it's still a more difficult matchup with the Padres. It's still, I don't think, quite as good a pitcher as Snell. So I think the field's pretty much got it right. I don't anticipate getting to like 60 or 70% or anything, but I think I probably just kind of come in around where, the 35 to 40%.
And I have to bring up, on the other side of the game, I can't feel good about it, obviously, but just due to the ownership, Arizona is my favorite contrarian stack of the slate. They bring a lot of leverage. And like I said, Snell's numbers away from home this year, they've been awful. Just to reiterate, when he's on the road this year, he's a 5.76 FIP. His strikeout rate drops to 24%. His walk rate jumps to 15.7%. Obviously, there's sample size issues with that, but he's been much better at home than he has been on the road. And we've seen Blake Snell on the entirety for the season just hasn't pitched that well. So when you consider the amount of ownership that's going towards him and the amount of inconsistencies that we've seen in his games this year, I think if you get to like 5-6% Arizona stacks, that's something I'm planning on doing. You're well overweight to the field, and it offers a lot of leverage off of Blake Snell.
Yeah, no issues at all with that for me. I think if I am playing a stack against a popular pitcher, like I'm much, much more interested in going to Arizona against Snell than I am going to Pittsburgh against Giolito, for example.
Yeah, and I mean we've got and by the way, nobody's gonna feel good rostering feel good rostering Arizona. We've got the laughing emoji in the chat. We've got Jason Garnett saying Arizona is worse than Snell has been on the road. I don't think anybody's worse than Snell's been on the road. It doesn't mean these are the numbers I'd expect from him going forward, but it's hard to not look at them and at least have it raise some alarm bells. He has not pitched well at all away from the team, and even if you look away from home, and his numbers overall for the season on the entirety, they're not great. He has a 4.58 ERA, 5.36 expected ERA. Obviously, the strikeout upside's there. If he breaks the slate, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm playing both sides, but I'm playing Arizona. I'm playing Snell. For single entry, I'd probably be apt to not go to either side, but that's just kind of trying to look at the ownership and where I think it's going to be. But for cash games, here's where I think this kind of becomes an interesting talking point for DK FanDuel. I don't think we have to consider Snell at all for cash games. But on DraftKings, it's 7,700. Is he somebody you want to play in cash games just based on what his ownership is?
Yeah, I expect to have Snell. I think he projects as one of the best options. He's 7,700. The Diamondbacks have a 3.8 implied run total. He's very likely to be one of the best point per dollar pitching options, and he's cheap enough. He opens up plenty of other stuff, so you can get to the bats that you want. Like I think Giolito plus Snell is easily the cash game pairing.
Yeah, it's tough for me. I think for me, I kind of feel like it could be Buehler. I think Buehler brings a little bit more security, but his matchup's so much tougher against the Braves, and he's more expensive. But I mean, just based on that, Snell's probably going to be like 60% owned in cash games. It's fine enough to just play him. It doesn't matter how much variance there is if everybody in the field's playing him. And then also I'd be concerned with the upside of him if I'm not playing him in the field at 60%. So as long as the ownership stays high, I guess I'd just be inclined to say play Snell in cash games. On the other side, Zach Gallen, I mentioned him as somebody who on the opposite side of Snell is maybe the only pitcher in this price range that kind of has some kind of comparable strikeout upside. So the matchup that Zach Gallen has against the Padres, how do you feel about both sides of this?
So Gallen, I think, and it always comes back to if you're rostering Blake Snell, you're going to want to have less popular hitters in that lineup. I think Zach Gallen is one of the pivots where if you have a more popular lineup and you need someone in this price range, Zach Gallen still gives you plenty of upside. It's a more dangerous matchup against the Padres, no doubt about it. But Gallen's got a 27.5% strikeout percentage this year, 3.97 xFIP. He's not drastically different from Blake Snell. Elevated walk percentage, gives up power, strikes out a lot of guys. Just kind of what he is. So at 4% ownership, he's certainly someone that you can use, gives you a similar ceiling to Snell at a very low, and takes away a lot of ownership. So I do have interest in Gallen for that reason, where I am going the more popular bats, but certainly not feeling great about it because, the Padres are a good offense.
Yeah. And with the Padres yesterday, this is something that, we don't have that much time left, but it's something I think would warrant a little bit more consideration. But it's something I wish I would have played the Padres a little bit more heavily yesterday. We had them projected as one of the more over-owned offenses of the entire season for an extended slate. But then it's what ended up happening was the Padres line took so long to come out that I think people just kind of got off the Padres, and either they were tired of waiting for the lineup or maybe people had stuff to do. But I mean, the Padres ended up having like half the amount of ownership they had projected. And just going forward, that's something where there are always little things I'm taking mental notes of, is just to think that to try to maybe get more of offenses in good spots when the lineup doesn't come out until after lock, because some people are just going to be pivoting off of them. But not going to matter for the Padres today because I'm not dying to roster them against Zach Gallen. But next game here to talk about, it is the Milwaukee Brewers on the road against the San Francisco Giants. Now, has Johnny Cueto been confirmed as the starter yet?
Not that I've seen. I've seen that he has a chance to pitch if he's feeling better.
Yeah, so Johnny Cueto, my understanding of the situation yesterday was he wasn't feeling well. I think they were considering placing him on the COVID list. So I don't know if they actually did, but we'll have to see if Johnny Cueto tests negative. Maybe that will make him available to start today. But for now, I guess there's not a lot we can make of the Giants pitching matchup versus the Brewers offense. We don't know who's going to be starting for them. But let's talk about Brandon Woodruff, who in a fairly similar type situation that Gordon Burns had yesterday, in terms of there's a lot of pitchers who are around Brandon Woodruff that are projected for more ownership. And Brandon Woodruff, obviously a really talented pitcher, but he has had some struggles in the second half of the season relative to the first half. And that matchup against San Francisco is far from ideal. So how does Woodruff rate out for you relative to guys like Giolito, Snell, and Buehler?
I like him more than Buehler, given the salary difference. On DraftKings, he's still $1,100 less expensive. I prefer Giolito because he's $600 less expensive and has the best matchup out of the group. The Giants are a really tough matchup. It is still a favorable pitcher's park, though, and I think that's something to keep in mind. And also, it's supposed to be like between 55 and 60 degrees in San Francisco, so good pitching weather. Also, Woodruff has arguably been the best pitcher on the slate this year. He leads the slate in strikeout percentage at 29.9%, 3.02 xFIP, 6.3% walk percentage. He's been really, really good. And this is another guy where I think he's normally a 10K plus pitcher, and that's his true talent level. So when you make him $9,400, you're kind of saying like, okay, he has a tough matchup, so we'll drop the price. That kind of makes the matchup not that important anymore. So I'm still very interested in getting to Woodruff. I still think that he should be basically the same price as Walker Buehler is in his game. So I do still like Woodruff. Again, I think in cash it's Giolito plus Snell, but I think that Woodruff is like the third guy basically.
Yeah, it's the other thing also, Woodruff versus Burns. Burns has overall been so good this season. And I think other than DeGrom, he's been the best starting pitcher in baseball. But he was somebody who, had some inconsistent performances as of late. He was terrific last night. Ren Woodruff, another one I'm not exactly sure what we're getting from him, but that aside, I have no interest in getting to the Giants here.
Yeah, me neither. Woodruff's really good. The Giants are good too, but I just think with the slate being as big as it is, there's just other spots I'd rather get to.
All right, no confirmed start yet for the Giants, so that is information that they're going to have to get to on Live Before Lock. So guys, after we're done here, don't go anywhere, stick around because there's going to be Live Before Lock and they're going to be hitting on some stuff. I think Eric's eating chalk or something because he's an insane person who, listen, Eric, you don't need to go that far for people to like you. You don't have to prove yourself. You've been here for a while. We like you. You don't have to paint eyebrows on yourself. You don't have to eat chalk. Nobody's sitting there going like, why isn't Eric eating chalk lately? You're going to be good. All right. He's gonna kill himself on the show because he's eating some kind of crazy foreign substance. It's all right. Relax a little bit. But Eric's gonna be eating chalk anyway after the show. So if you guys do want to see Eric potentially die on camera, all the more reason to like this video. Stick around, watch Live Before Lock. Next game that we have here, Walker Buehler on the mound for the Dodgers against the Braves. Now, Walker Buehler's been very, very good this year, especially in the second half of the season. He hardly has bad starts. He hardly gives up any kind of runs. However, he is a lot more expensive than some of the other pitchers we have to consider here. So other guys that are chalk we've talked about, Blake Snell, Lucas Giolito, Brandon Woodruff, these guys all offer significant salary savings against Walker Buehler. I do see Buehler as being really safe. I'm just not sure how much I really want to get to him today, given these other options are so much cheaper.
Yeah, that's the issue for me. Like Walker Buehler, there's nothing wrong with him. Atlanta is a relatively difficult matchup, but Buehler should have the advantage there. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's struck out 27.1% hitters this year, which on this slate actually isn't that high, but it's still a very good strikeout percentage. 3.49 xFIP, 6.4% walk percentage. He's averaging 6.5 innings pitched per start this year, so that's really good as well. Kind of like Zach Wheeler last night, it just gives you a higher floor. Even in the starts where he struggles, he's typically going to get you, double-digit fantasy points even in his bad games. So Buehler's fine. It's just what you have to give up to get to him. I think that for example, Giolito projects similarly to Buehler, if not better, given the matchup, and he's way less expensive. Brandon Woodruff projects similarly. He's way less expensive on DraftKings. So it's just really difficult to get there. Like, yeah, there are cheap bats on the slate, but there's also guys that you want to pay for. So it's not to say like in tournaments not to play Buehler. I think if you happen to have cheap lineups and the money for Buehler, that's fine. I think on DraftKings, he's a mistake in cash. I don't really think there's any way around it.
If you have the salary, I don't mind getting to him just because I do think he has a higher floor than Snell or Woodruff. Giolito is a lock in cash games. FanDuel played Giolito in cash. GK played Giolito. But if there's a situation where you have a lot of salary left over, I don't mind getting to Buehler just because I view him as safer than Snell. But the reason I'd still go to Snell anyways, because I think Snell's going to be like 60 to 70% owned in cash games, and you're just kind of shit out of luck if he has a ceiling game. So given the ownership, I'd still go to Snell. But if the ownership was to come down on Snell and go up on Buehler in that kind of situation, I wouldn't mind getting to Buehler. Other side of the game, as good as the Braves offense is, I don't have interest in stacking them. What do you make of this matchup Charlie Morton has against the Dodgers? Because Morton as a pitcher has been really good this year. I can't in good conscience roster any pitcher against this just absurd Dodgers lineup. But the Dodgers as a stack, is this a team you have interest in getting to against Morton?
In theory, I love the idea of getting to Charlie Morton here just because he's really good. He's 8,900. He's getting 1% ownership. Like, it's so difficult to get a pitcher this good at no ownership. And he's not even that expensive at 8,900. in practice, I think I'll have a difficult time getting to him just because the matchup is so tough. There are so many different ways to save ownership rather on this slate without going to Morton, but not really on the Dodgers here either. They're always a team that if they're going to get 1% ownership, I've said it before, like them, the Astros, teams like that, if over the course of a season, you just completely ignore what pitcher they're facing and just stack them every time they're 1% owned, you most likely make money over the course of the season. But on a slate of this size, I just have trouble prioritizing them over some of these other teams that are getting similar ownership and don't have to face Charlie Morton, who just has been excellent this year.
Yeah, and the other thing too, if we do look at the Dodgers in our top stacks tool, which as I've said a couple of times, that is the free content on Awesemo.com today. So I definitely recommend checking out. That is my favorite piece of data that we have up on the site. We do have the Dodgers right now, only 1.1% projected ownership, 2.8% chance being a top stack. So it is a team that I'm going to be getting to at least more than the field. Not that it's saying a whole bunch, but I mean, if you have 3 to 4% Dodger stacks, I don't mind that as a way to get over top of the field. And it is an offense still that has so much firepower that this is a team kind of when we talk about the Yankees, the Blue Jays is a team we've gotten to and they've been lower on. That's how I feel about this Dodgers team also. So Los Angeles is a team that I definitely want to get a little bit over the top of just given the total lack of ownership there. Final game that we have here to talk about, Yusei Kikuchi on the mound for Seattle, Lance McCullers for the Houston Astros. Now, let's talk about McCullers for a second here because of all the guys that have upside on the high end, this is the one guy that kind of feels like the left out piece. Lance McCullers, pretty expensive at 10,100. The matchup against the Seattle Mariners is pretty favorable. But if I'm paying up for a pitcher, to me, it's just going to be Walker Buehler.
Yeah, that's, I think, what kind of does it for me. The matchup's fine. McCullers is a good pitcher. He's got a 27.8% strikeout percentage, has some of the same issues as Snell, 11% walk percentage, makes it so sometimes his pitch count gets driven up and he doesn't get that deep in the games. If Buehler didn't exist on this slate, I could see looking to McCullers and saying like, okay, that's one spot you can pay up to be relatively contrarian, get a little bit of an ownership discount off of someone like Brandon Woodruff or, Giolito or whoever. But with Buehler being there, I'm not really sure what the purpose is. Like if Buehler's getting 20% ownership and McCullers is going to get about 15, functionally in a lineup, that's about the same. It's not making a drastic difference. If I'm going to get an ownership discount off of Woodruff or Giolito in tournaments, I would really just like to get Walker Buehler.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. It's a big slate. It always presents a lot of options. And if McCullers was lower owned, then I think I'd look at him as a really good contrarian play. But 15%, maybe that's it's slightly lower than it should be. But I'd rather get to Snell, Giolito, Woodruff, Buehler. He just kind of becomes odd man left out, especially when he's 10,100 on DK. FanDuel at 9,200, I think he becomes a little bit more reasonable, but he's the single most popular pitcher on the slate over at FanDuel. So I was asking at the 9,200 price tag for McCullers on FanDuel, is that something that interests you?
Yeah, it's tough because it's a better price tag, but it's also, the opportunity cost of the position goes up quite a bit as well. So it kind of, I think, comes out in the wash. Like you have McCullers right now with a 7.5% chance of being the top owned or the top pitcher on FanDuel, 18.8% ownership. I actually think Snell is a little bit better option there. He's got the same odds of being the top pitcher, but is projected for a little bit less ownership. So it's fine on McCullers, but I still just kind of think he's a secondary option on FanDuel as well.
Yeah, and then on the other side, it's going to be Yusei Kikuchi on the mound against the Houston Astros. Same situation we pretty much had with the Houston Astros the last few slates. They are not the most likely team on the slate to have success, but they're picking up less than 1% ownership. It's a fairly high priority stack for me. I want to get over the top of Houston yesterday. Disappointed for most of the game. Then Kyle Tucker bailed out those stacks late. So ended up being the slightest of positive days for me just because of that late home run by Kyle Tucker. But Houston Astros, for what feels like the 10th slate in a row, I'm going to be underway to an unowned Houston team.
Yep. I have a lot of respect for Kikuchi. Don't really care. Houston's just not getting ownership and they're too good for that. You look at the top stack percentage, they're just lumped in with this group of like 10 teams that are all between 3 and 5%. And they're getting the least ownership out of any. It's basically them in Boston getting the least ownership out of the group. So yeah, I'll get to Houston here. It's a situation where I don't think you necessarily need to have, 15 to 20%, but it's not going to be difficult to get over the field. It's one of the highest upside teams just because of how much talent they have. Kikuchi does give up power too. He's a good pitcher, but this season he has allowed a 199 expected ISO to right-handed hitters, 172 to lefties. It's not like he's one of these guys that goes out there and like it's shocking if he gives up a few home runs. The Astros certainly can get to him, and they're not getting any ownership right now.
All right, that is going to do it for Adam and I. However, this channel is not going to be ending here. MLB Live Before Lock is coming next. Gene B. Kim has already left the super chat. He's here for the chalk. That's what's coming up next. It is going to be Eric Lindquist eating chalk because he's dumb.
Yep.
And we are live. Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock. It is Tuesday, August 31st. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Eric Lindquist. And boy, do we have a fun Live Before Lock for you. Got a nice 14-game slate. We're going to dig into every single bit of it over the next hour. But first, for two separate reasons. One, just because you love us. And two, because of what's about to happen, please subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and most importantly, let's hit that like button. We need to run that number north of 200 immediately for what's about to happen. The floor now is yours, Eric. How are you feeling about what is about to take place? Feel free to explain to anyone that might not know what you are about to do.
This is the most nervous I've been for a show since my very first show. I'm pretty sure I have like the butterflies. I've been thinking about it all day. I've had this box of chalk here and I've not opened it. I didn't want to test anything out. I didn't want to like take a bite or do whatever. Some people are freaking out. Don't do it. Don't do it. Some people they can't wait for me to do it. It is just what it is. This is white chalk. And y'all, last Monday, I said if you got us over 400 likes, that I would eat the chalk. If you get over 500 likes, no, I can't do it. I can't weasel out of it now. So I think we're just going to do it here. We're going to open it up. We're going to open up the chalk here. Well done, everybody. So here we go.
Hold on. Do not eat that chalk yet. We are at 187 likes. I refuse to do this until that number is 200.
Fair.
Do your job, folks.
Just saying. I'm going to test out the consistency here.
I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's quite chalky.
It is very chalky. You can see my fingers coming off the chalk here. I've got a towel just in case of issues. Whatever else here. So
we're over 200 pretty easily. So best of luck to you here.
Okay. So again, I mean, I'll just take another one out. So I mean, you can see these are identical things. I'm not screwing off anything. So here we go.
Can you like ASMR it? Try to eat it like pretty close to the microphone.
All right. Oh my God.
The best part of this would have been if you were like, you know what? It's not that bad.
No, it's that bad.
Do you have any dipping sauces? Is today Chick-fil-A day? Do you happen to have any like
it's
Polynesian?
Chick-fil-A day.
Okay.
I mean, I just bit into that. That was a lot of chalk.
But it doesn't seem like nearly enough chalk.
You're going to make me eat another bite of this?
I mean, I wouldn't have made you eat a single bite of this. So I don't really know if I should be the arbiter.
Oh my God.
Make sure you're hitting that like button, everybody, because I think our pal Eric is deserving of a thumbs up here.
All right. I think I ate half of it. Is that enough?
I don't know what the terms were. I'm not mad about it. It only matters that you swallow it at this point.
I'm going to swallow it. That's enough. Everybody's saying that's enough. Thank you.
I assume it just is really unappealing, but is...
It's like I'm trying to think of the right words for it. Well, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It feels like, I mean, the closest thing is flour. Like if you have raw flour and you're just eating that out of a canister with a thing. Yeah, I'm eating bad chalk. Thanks a lot, Gene Kim.
Gene Kim with the super chat, making sure to let Eric know how he feels about this entire
scenario. That was not
a
candy steg. I'm dead serious. That's straight out of the box, yo.
Oh God, there it is. It's good that I mean, even if it was a candy cig, that would have been fun.
It's definitely not. Do I need a witness? I got a fiance that's gonna probably kill me later. So
oh man, you're gonna be on My Strange Addiction soon enough. I think that there was a person that ate chalk.
On purpose?
Chalk, My Strange Addiction. Yeah, I think it was like all this person ate. Oh yeah, there it is. God. My Strange Addiction, chalk eater. Yeah, that is one of them. It is that's a thing.
Thanks, y'all. This is great.
Yeah. So maybe you should check that one out. Send her words of encouragement or something along those lines.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I can't believe you just did that. I have very little that I can add here.
I mean,
it seems pretty awful, but appreciate the fans checking this bad boy out. Up to 270 likes now. It's nice.
I'm gonna say people like watching me be miserable, whether it's Paul George, whether it's eating of chalk, whether it's trolls, whether it's oh my God.
How you holding up over there? On a scale, like, would you say, all right, so was that better or worse than you were expecting?
I would say it's a little bit better than I was expecting. Just like,
okay.
I mean, it's terrible. It was awful, but I was kind of gearing it up to be like the worst thing that I've ever done in terms of putting something in my body. I don't think that it's the worst thing I've ever put in my body. I bet any drink I've ever had with alcohol in it is probably worse for me than what I just did. Somebody just please don't agree to stupid shit like this again. Dude, this is what I do. I'm here for the people. And again, if you guys if you guys win a bet against me, I'm going to pay up. So here we are.
You know what it would have been the most crazy part of this entire story? Imagine if something, God forbid, would have happened and you would have died and the police would have showed up and put a chalk outline around your body. The irony in that situation would have just been really incredible.
Awesemo hit 6 million subs. We become like a subreddit. Like I don't even know.
That would have been like the new thing if you had to talk about chalky hitting and pitching. It would have just been you being like complete classic stuff. So
it went down.
Kudos to you for paying off a bet. The question then becomes, what do you want to do with Brandon Woodruff, Lucas Giolito, and Blake Snell, the chalk for today? How hungry are you still for chalk?
No. The transition, I was going to say, I didn't know how we were going to just like quietly exit and backstep from what just happened or what went down. Yeah, we covered it in the first 10 minutes. Now we talk baseball. Let's party. I absolutely love getting to Brandon Woodruff on this slate. Same thing with San Francisco. I'm concerned right-handed pitching, 199 ISO, best ISO against right-handed pitching in baseball. And I bring it up every single show, but just comes down for me. Brandon Woodruff is phenomenal. There should be no questions in your mind about how effective he's going to be on the mound tonight. I think he's going to be phenomenal, and I look forward to rostering all of him possible. I just know for a fact that at 9,400, I just don't know why he got such a price decrease here in this spot. And because of that, I'm just going to be jamming a lot more. I went through a lot of lineup study yesterday because the Robbie Ray thing was really fascinating to me yesterday against Baltimore. Wanted to see what some of the top players did. Alex played 83% of him in the 3-3-3. A lot of these other spots. Robbie Ray, 50% owned. You know, we look at the top two pitcher, and he has always said it. He's been very, very adamant that, like, you can play some of the chalkier pitchers. You get different with your stack. It's where a majority of your offenses are. And if there's a pitcher that just makes a lot of sense, and the strikeout, the ceiling that exists, he had the highest ceiling and he had a combination of a floor because you get 6-7 Ks. Yeah, you can give up some runs and you're still going to survive in some of those outings. And the guy goes for double digit Ks, breaks the slate, pretty done. I think we're looking at kind of that same situation at a cheaper number here. 9,400 for him makes it really tough for me to not want to play all of him on this slate. Him and Giolito, I'm just going to be prioritizing. And I know that Bueller and those guys kind of like sit around. Blake Snell is the one that I'm going to hit eject on and find ways to get a little bit more different. But Woodruff, Giolito combined, I just absolutely love them. Chalk City, let's go.
Interesting. Ejecting on Blake Snell, $7,700 price tag, a little bit easier to eat than, say, chalk, for example.
A little bit more. A little bit.
What leads you to the eject button on Blake Snell's 39% ownership?
So there's a couple things. One, he has definitely been better. We've seen the pitch count start to rise here for Blake Snell. Yes, he's 7,700. And for me, it comes down to, I think that there's just a little bit more risk that I watched that entire outing. He was absolutely on fire against the Dodgers. It seems like he plays, this is a weird thing to throw out there, but to the level of his competition, we see that a little bit more in basketball or other sports. And I don't know necessarily how to quantify it, but he was jacked up. He was geared up for that Dodger outing, and he pitched phenomenally well, gave up the one solo shot to Will Smith that ended up giving him led to 16 innings of fun stuff in that game. But Blake Snell against the same Arizona team back-to-back times. He had a 42.8 fantasy point outing, and then he had a 14.5 fantasy point outing. It just seems like you never know what you're going to get. And I just think that ownership might be even more pronounced than what we have here right now. And because of the volatility of it, give me the rest of the range of like these top-end pitchers. I don't need that. Like a lot of my stacks kind of sit in that little mid-range where I don't need all the salary in the entire world to get up to the top bats. And so I would much rather just kind of cut some of the ownership in my lineups by going more Woodruff, going more Giolito, having a little bit more of them, and then scattershotting some of the guys below him. Like Zach Gallen, I think is kind of getting slept on a little bit here, but Blake Snell definitely in this spot. I think there's more volatility. So at like 40-50% owned, which I think he'll be in at least some of the 3-max stuff that I'm doing, I'm going to probably be lower on him.
So I am lower on him as well. And I was a lot lower earlier in the day. And obviously, you and I are on the same page in that we know what his ceiling is. You would not be surprised for Blake Snell to go out and strike 10 dudes out. Like that is very much in his repertoire. I think 39% feels a little heavy. I have him marked at 21%. So being in the like low to mid 20s seems pretty good for me. I don't want to say that I'm not with you on Woodruff, but I guess I'm not with you on Woodruff. I just see him, Buehler, and McCullers as super similar, and I'm flat on those guys instead of Woodruff getting the larger concentration like we're seeing in the ownership. I don't have any issue getting to Woodruff. Obviously, he's fantastic, and 9,400 is a decent price tag. But I'm more off of Woodruff and Snell from an ownership perspective. I'd like to be, let's call Woodruff something in that 15 to 20 range, Snell in that 20 to 25, and I think I'd be pretty happy there. Giolito is the one that I can't get away from. My highest projected pitcher for the day. I think that ownership is more than valid.
Okay, that's fair. Everything you said is fair. For me, I'm going to be getting off of a lot of the chalkier stacks. I don't have to worry about so much ownership there, and so getting to some of the better pitchers on this slate. Considering I'll be lower on one of the main guys, somebody that I think will end up being the highest owned out of all of them, coming off of some massive games, has no pitch count concerns. Yeah, he can get those. He can get in trouble just in terms of walks, and that's always going to be a case. But he's starting to pitch a lot better of late, and I think people are just maybe riding it a little bit harder, some recency bias. And of course, it's a fantastic matchup, but you got to find ways to get off of the field somewhere. I'm going to be making one of my larger stands on a guy who's giving up still on the season a 447 expected slugging, 42.3% hard hit percentage. There's enough righties here where I could see Blake Snell having more issues than the field does.
Is there anyone you're getting to that isn't chalk? I know that is not entirely your MO.
Yeah, no, I'm literally eating chalk, and I'm literally eating chalk at pitching. I like you. So we're going to talk Houston, and I love, like, this is an absolute for me, play both sides of it special. And Houston, we've seen randomly, and I don't know if there's a way to really kind of throw this together, because Houston on the whole, one of the best teams in terms of avoiding strikeouts against both-handedness, but Yusei Kikuchi, 25.3% K percentage, all of the same signs that we're talking about for Blake Snell. Yusei Kikuchi is at 1/10 of the ownership here, and it's an atrocious matchup as opposed to a good one, but there's just enough K opportunity here where if he can avoid giving up something huge in this spot, there's like no risk in playing him because the ownership is just not going to be there whatsoever. He's 8,300. He's under like 1% right now. He'll end up being like 1-2% owned against Houston. And Houston's not a team you want to be picking on, but there's enough guys getting called up here in spots. Do we even have that lineup here? I have my projected with like Jake Myers, Kyle Tucker's back in there, who does not strike out for sure. But Martin Maldonado, Jake Myers is at 30.3%. Taylor Jones, not sure, 26.9%. Jordan Alvarez, 24.5%. That's four guys north of 24%. And Yusei Kikuchi, 25.3% K percentage on the season. I think for under 1%, I'm right around 10% of him right now in like the $4 and the $1 stuff over on DK. And I feel good in large field GPPs. Being on both sides of that, it's easy to get over the field on Houston with the upside, and it's easy to get over top of Yusei Kikuchi on the other end, who is somebody just with like unspoken upside.
Similar question in reverse now. Is there anybody that, more so than like the Blake Snell that we talked about, is there anybody that is getting owned that you are avoiding?
I'm going to be avoiding Jameson Taillon. And
okay.
So I know the guys had talked on the last show about playing Jameson Taillon, and I think a lot of that did make sense. 7,300, 12.7% owned. But this LA team, just in terms of like having the back end, sure, there are some Ks that have shown up here, but Jameson Taillon going up against guys that he's just not my favorite pitcher. 23.5% K percentage, 40.5% hard hit percentage, and it's coming in the air. A lot of that is a 20.5 degree launch angle. This is obviously a ballpark upgrade for him for sure. This lineup isn't super imposing, but I don't know what it is about it. It seems like another spot where he might come in a little bit higher owned than what we've got. And 7,300, I just don't find myself needing to get to him or Blake Snell as much on this slate. I'm more concentrated on Woodruff, Giolito, and then again, going just way off the board with certain plays in these large field. I mean, there's a lot of great contests around the industry, and I would rather take some shots with, the other 20 pitchers than concentrate it all on Snell, Taillon, and, Taillon pulling double-digit ownership. Right now, he's still, the 6th or 7th highest owned pitcher on the slate. I would, Austin Gomber as well, same thing for me, where I just don't see a crazy amount of upside for both of them comparatively to some of the pitchers above them. So a little bit lighter on both of them. I would rather just take some of, again, it shouldn't be a surprise, the chalkier pitchers in Giolito and Woodruff.
The guy that I'm looking at that isn't getting any ownership right now, who was earlier in the day, is Trevor Williams. 6,600 shortened game, a Marlins team that has garbage in the lineup, an aggregate 85 weighted runs created plus. That's without me factoring in Edward Cabrera, so we can even bring that down a little bit lower, I would imagine. Sandy Leon and I don't remember how to say his name.
Scherer.
Yes. Well, for some reason, the middle of letters were not where I was expecting them to be. Either way, both guys project sub 70 weighted runs created plus via Steamer. Only Jesus Sanchez is above 100. This is a truly abysmal lineup. And I think for Williams not getting any love at all, he's got a better chance to throw a complete game, given the fact that this is only going to go 7. If he's efficient, he can stay out there. That's the direction I'm looking a little bit. I'm with you on the Gomber lack of love at 8,200.
Nice. Okay, because both of those, I mean, the top 2 pitcher tool does a great job of encapsulating Austin Gomber. 7.2% top 2 pitcher percentage, coming in with 12.8% ownership. Again, that's pretty negligible, but it's also enough on this large of a slate for me to want to just do other things and go other places. If he were 6,200 pitching in Coors against Texas and he was going to be 2 or 3% owned, like that's really the interest of playing Gomber in large fields, is that he can still go 6 or 7 at a cheaper price tag. But 8,200, hard for me to imagine that he's going to have a ton of upside on that tag. And I just would rather go other places. I'd rather go to just about every single pitcher in the 8K range other than him, just based on ownership, other than Zach Davies, who sucks.
I think that's pretty fair. I have very little interest in Gomber. Yeah, Trevor Williams just showed up in 15% of my sims, so we'll see where that actually ends up.
See, that's the kind of stuff, like for me, where it just, Trevor Williams is not a good pitcher by any means, but like Miami just kind of defies everything that we know about matchup. So we should just kind of take shots on them no matter what. And if nobody else is, that's when you really want to be over the field. So I actually am going to add him back to my pool. Why not?
And for 6,600, not a lot of downside either. Like, obviously, if it goes bad, it goes bad, but you'd rather have that happen at 6,600 than 9,600.
Well, and I always get to blame you if it goes wrong. So it's an emotional free roll here at this point. I don't really have a whole lot else. Again, I'm not really going underneath 7K. I don't see any reason that is there anybody you would even take a shot on underneath 7K? We had Edward Cabrera, 7.4% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. And I thought I was going to get to him more, and I'm just not. I don't know if that's a product of the slate and me just playing some of the higher end pitchers here and then kind of spreading out my exposures and stacks. But are you getting to anybody underneath 7K? Because I'm not, other than Trevor Williams now.
So Trevor Williams showed up in 15% of my run. And then the next highest guy is at 5%. Not who I would have expected, but to me, this is mostly just randomness. That would be Cole Irvin. I'm not advocating for that. What that is basically saying is that I don't really want to go any lower than Trevor Williams.
If there was like a top end stack or a Coors, or I think then maybe I would start talking myself into this. But all my offenses that I really want to get to, it's very easy to slam them in with some of the better pitchers. So I'm just kind of going that way.
Schedule for the rest of the day looks like this. The free content for today is the top stacks tool and PGA rankings. No more shows tonight, guys. You should go watch all of the VOD content we have on this channel, on Awesemo Odds, on Awesemo Fantasy Football. Plenty of more shows coming up live tomorrow. But for right now, this is it. This is all we got.
We got.
So let's talk a little bit about bats then. Who is your primary, or maybe multiple primaries? Who are your favorite stacks for today?
Oh, yeah. No, multiple primaries is the right way to talk about it on a massive slate like this. For me, I'm going, and again, I think the guys were kind of down on Boston in this spot. And Boston, if you're going to be paying up to get different here, we just got that lineup here, I believe. Let me see if I can pull that back up. I saw Renfroe ended up being in it. Maybe not. Okay, maybe we don't have that here yet. I thought I saw that lineup came through, and they were a team that once I plugged them in, I was running it while I was talking and seemed to get a little bit more of them. But they were just completely unowned, and underneath 1%, a Boston Red Sox team. He still carried around a 5 implied total there before. I guess it's down to 4.1 in the last run here. We'll see what that lineup ends up being. But I liked getting to them a little bit earlier just based on what that leverage score was going to be. I like getting to Tampa Bay always. Tampa Bay 4.4 percent chance of being a top stack on this. All these top stack numbers are pretty irrelevant if you're not talking about the Yankees and you're not talking about Toronto. And those are the two teams that I'm just going to be vehemently cheering against today. I'm going to play them a little bit here. I've got some cash lineups that I'm kind of toying with two different ones for FanDuel today, weirdly enough. But I've got like a Giolito and a McCullers lineup where I have some Minnesota and Toronto and Yankees and trying to play some of those guys and then scattering it amongst like some tournament lineups over there. And I feel pretty good about doing it that way just because I think those offenses are in such a good spot, but I'm going to pretty much be cheering against them here. Houston, I already talked about liking them at the same time that I like getting over the field on Kikuchi for those reasons as well. Minnesota's going way over owned. There's no question that I'm going to have to hit eject on that here as we're getting closer to lock. But for me, I think the one team that I find to be fascinating, and there's a little bit of negative leverage, but looking at yesterday as opposed to today, Zach Gallen is a good pitcher, but this San Diego lineup, you get to like Grisham, Cronenworth, Machado, Tatis, Hosmer. I mean, they have the perfect combination of Tatis is the only really expensive bat there. Everybody else is pretty cheap. You get Nolan now in the 6 hole, which is useful. You don't really have to play Frazier, Profar. It's a big enough slate. I think people are going to go other places. I just think San Diego getting the 9th inning bump, everything else with this lineup, specifically like 2 and 3 mans. I really like getting to San Diego today. I'm playing them a little bit in some 3 max stuff, and I feel pretty good about it. How about you?
I don't mind them in terms of where they rank overall. They're my number 7 team. I do see them as one of the bigger negative leverage scores. So they would be a team that I would want to dig into at least a little bit more. I'm pulling up the Diamondbacks and Padres right now. I did bet on the under in this game, so I guess in theory I'm cheering against them.
We just have
Cronenworth at 12%. It's not bad.
Yeah, we just have such significant negative scores on Minnesota, the White Sox, and then Toronto and Yankees aren't like terribly off, but they're still like 12 and 13% ownership on a 14 game slate. So for me, that's kind of like stay away territory as well. San Diego just seemed like a little bit more upside and it was kind of light enough negative leverage that I thought it would be all right, but continue on. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. It's not, they're a team that I would still get to because I don't think the negative leverage is all that heavy. And like I said, they're my number 7 overall. They wouldn't be a giant priority for me. I would still be getting to Toronto. I think that they are far and away the best option today, and the ownership doesn't hurt me as much. I think the Yankees are about neutral. They're my number 2 team. I'd be okay, like having some, but not a ton. Twins and White Sox, I want to be significantly lower. I think that ownership is quite a bit too high, particularly. Look, if you're playing cash today, you're using Byron Buxton. That goes without saying. You can pretty easily get away from him in a twin stack, which doesn't make it all that bad. For the White Sox, to me, they are the most overowned team in my model. I can just get away from them. The team that I want to talk about, they're a little bit higher in the top stacks tool now. They do have a very sizable positive leverage score. The Colorado Rockies are my number 6 overall and my number 1 team in leverage. Other than Trevor Story, no one is owned by more than 1%. Jordan Lyles is not very good, or at least does not project to be very good. Colorado is expensive. Doesn't appear that they are an optimizer stack. They don't come up because of the giant price tags across the board. I think Colorado is my favorite stack of the day if you get the combination of top stack odds and ownership.
So I loved that cat that they had on the mound yesterday pitching for Texas. He was somebody that I had talked about on Live Before Lock where I was just a lot higher on him, I thought, than the field. He ended up getting a bunch of ownership compared to what I was expecting. That was unfortunate, but still in the plus side, he ended up having a really good outing. That worked out pretty well still. But yeah, this is Jordan Lyles we're talking about here. So I don't really think it's the same situation. I miss the old Arlington ballpark when we used to be able to just kind of like manufacture offense. It was especially when it was on the same slate as a Coors Field slate, and you could kind of basically get discounted offenses up and down the lineups. This ballpark, it just seems like it doesn't work, and the roof's always closed. And I want to play some Rockies, but Connor Joe Tapia, Trevor Story coming off of yesterday, he'll definitely be a little bit more popular, but maybe not at 5.7K. Looking at the ownership, it looks pretty muted. Ryan McMahon, somebody that I expected to be a much bigger part of this offense, and actually was hitting for some power earlier this season, and he's kind of dwindled down a little bit here this season. It's been a little bit more muted. CJ Cron, we know, rakes at home, and it's been a little bit more difficult. I guess he was hitting homers out here in LA as well, but I think it's all right. It's just not a team that I'm super enthusiastic. Of course, they get rid of the pitcher spot as well, but you end up putting Sam Hillard in there, and it's not that big of a deal to me. I get why you want to do it. I'm not super enthusiastic about the offense as a whole. They stick out in the top stacks tool, second most leverage next to Houston there. Sure, you can fire them up. Maybe I should get a little bit more, but I'm not enthused about it.
I think something very interesting happened in baseball. I want to make sure that I'm getting this right. Yeah, so this Mets-Marlins game from today, the makeup piece.
Yeah.
Javi Baez just scored the winning run for the Mets. This was a game that was suspended from April 11th, if I'm understanding this correctly. Yep. He also scored the only run of the day for the Cubs on April 11th for real. So he scored the winning run, and he has scored 2 runs for different teams, technically speaking, on the exact same day.
That's outrageous. Did somebody put that in chat, or where'd you see that at?
Jason Stark tweeted it.
Oh my God.
So
that is pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty cool. Also, there we go.
Yeah, it's got to be a mess for people that are in like stats and have to reconcile the fact that like Javi Baez scored a run for a team that he wasn't on a date where he wasn't on that team, but now is. Just the complications of that are ridiculous. But either way, I just saw Jason Stark tweet it, so I wanted to bring it up because it seemed kind of fun.
If they had like the hockey stars where it was 3 stars for baseball players, could Javi Baez get one on both teams on the same day? That'd be pretty cool.
Probably. They should do that for every sport. I know Fangraphs does it in their box scores. You could like pick the guys you want for the stars. That should just be like a thing. It's just more interesting.
I agree. I think it's fun to also be like, yeah, I know I was one of the, like when they had the goalkeeper that was like the 3rd or 4th goalkeeper, the backup for both teams. I can't remember what that game was. He ends up getting the star. I mean, that's the thing that you like put on your mantle for the rest of your life.
Hell yeah. Any other stacks we want to touch on here? We kind of talked a little bit about the Twins and White Sox being a bit overowned. We talked about the Jays and the Yankees and their top stack odds in general. Is there anybody else you like that isn't picking up any ownership? Like I've got the Rays as a positive leverage team, the Tigers, Rangers, Red Sox, Cubs. I mean, these are teams that have like 3% odds of being a top stack for me, but pulling a little bit less ownership than I was expecting. Who are your like sleeper teams?
All right. So, I mean, it's not a sleeper team because they have one of the top 3-5 offenses in baseball, but anytime the Dodgers are going to be 1% on a slate, you should just roster some Dodgers and manually find a way to jam in some more of those guys. Going up against Charlie Morton. I mean, Charlie Morton, we haven't even brought up, which is strange because he's been a chalk staple piece of like every slate. I think Charlie Morton is tough to get to on this slate. 8,900. Sure, he's coming in under 2% owned. You could have a little bit there, but it just feels like a spot where, he's under 2% and then the Dodgers are like at 1%. And something could give in that game for sure. You're talking about one of the most dynamic offenses that, has Trey Turner bets in there for speed and can kind of create runs that way. You have power everywhere 1 through 8 in the entire lineup. I think on days when you're getting 0 ownership towards those dudes, and it's a pretty cool day out here in LA. It's like 70 degrees out here. So it's not like your typical August 31st game you'll get. A lot of cloud cover, pretty whatever out here, but this is still a Dodgers team, and you should still have more than 1% of them considering, Toronto, phenomenal offense, Yankees, phenomenal offense, but coming in 10x what the Dodgers are, I think on any slate, you should just kind of manually find a way to get to more of them.
I think I'm with you. It just feels natural to make that play. I don't think you'll ever feel bad about it.
No.
Even if it doesn't win, like it's just like, okay, at least I'm putting my money on one of the better offenses.
You're going to look at your lineup that you have for it, and you're going to be like, wait, I got Trey Turner, Max Muncy, Mookie Betts, Justin Turner, Corey Seager, under 2%. Okay, sure. I'll take my shots with that. Like that feels like something I want 5% of on this slate, no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I have them 18th of the 28 teams today, which to me is reasonable. 6th in leverage, like they're fully unowned. You would love to see Charlie. Like I wish Charlie Morton was pulling a little bit more ownership. It would make that Dodger stack feel even better. But again, you don't overthink it. Like they project for a 125 weighted runs created plus for the game. Sometimes that's just going to break right. Sometimes that's just going to break the right way.
Yeah, and it's going to be uncomfortable to play them with any of it's going to be hard to get to some of these other pitchers, but Will Smith 4,400, playing him as well. There's Pollock and Bellinger 7-8 hole. I mean, you can stack them up whatever way you want to. There's upside. They're going to be completely unowned. Those are the days, and you should be identifying it. And considering they're 0.1 runs less than Houston, and we're already talking about Houston and how great of a leverage team they are. I just at least want to point out, hey, Dodgers, best offense in baseball, arguably. You should probably stack them up.
Guys, promo code. You ready for this? WR gets you the Awesemo Fantasy Football Draft Kit for season-long and best ball fantasy leagues. I have been using this tool on multiple videos on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, which you guys should go check out. It's going to be using the same projections and tools and analysis that we use for our NFL DFS package, but you're getting the Draft Wingman tool. The most valuable thing we've got going for season long and best ball. It's basically giving you the draft on a single platter, on one individual platter as well. Best ball rankings and a stacking guide, trade value chart, and more. You can get up to a $35 credit for underdog and FFPC leagues. And by using this promo code WR, you get 33% off, which means that you're getting everything that I just explained for less than $10. It's everything we have to offer for season long and best ball. Click the link from Nightbot in chat if you see it, or just go straight to awesemo.com. Click the link for the draft kit. Click on the Awesemo Fantasy Football link at the top, then click the link for the draft kit. Many of different ways for you to get there, but you should do it for sure. It's well worth the price tag. Look, honestly, it's worth it without the promo code and without the credit to Underdog and FFPC. It just gets even better just in general. Okay, we've talked about top pitchers. We've talked about top stacks, which means now it is time to get positional. Oh, did we just really get two? We did. We got the Astros lineup and we got the Red Sox lineup in the past couple seconds.
Renfroe leading off. How about that?
Oh, that is, well, different.
If you saw me staring at my computer a little bit closer, it's because I thought I was misreading something. And
well, I'm going to grab both of these lineups quickly so that I can update my information, and then I'm going to have to just go by old stuff unless you've got something that will allow us to run in place for can you eat chalk again, please, until this crunch is done?
It's like,
I thought you were about to do it. I legitimately thought you were about to do it.
No, absolutely not. That was atrocious, and I never want to do that again. Ryan,
well, what if we get to 400 links? Or
Lindpack himself was calling me out, saying that, oh, he was eating like a candy cigarette or whatever he said earlier. Shut up, dude. You know me. I wouldn't do that on the people. I wouldn't do such a thing. I mean, this is straight up as chalky as it gets.
Yeah, there's not really any way for us to have policed that either way,
Yeah, well, now there's chalk all over my
you,
keyboard.
Is it chalk or is it powdered sugar?
Yeah, there you go. And it's like, it's delicious. No.
Yuck. Oh, gross.
No,
just absolutely delish. All right, I got my crunch running. So we're running in place a little bit, which is helping me out tremendously. We're at 330 likes, 913 viewers. I mean, 400 is here. If we get to 500, will you eat another bite?
Yeah, I will. I'll eat one more bite.
More
bite. Honestly,
Woodley tattoo bet.
This is like in high school when you have that one friend where it's like, oh, you should eat 15 tacos. And I'm just that guy at 33 years old. So
I will happily be the guy that eats 15 tacos in lieu of being the guy that eats the chalk. That much I could tell you.
500 likes. I will eat another bite, and I'll take a big bite. It'll be on the way out. We'll do it.
Well, there you go, guys. You heard it here first. Hit that like button. More
I better win
chalk
100K today.
Incoming.
Yeah.
That'll buy a lot of chalk. All right. At catcher, I need your cash preferred option and your favorite GPP option for today.
In the catcher position, I don't know why. Did Cruncher just go down for everybody else, or is it just my end right now?
I'm fine right now, but I also didn't try refreshing. So
let me refresh, because I was just trying to get all the Boston stuff from my spreadsheet and carry it over.
I mean, look, we can run in place for a little bit longer.
No, it'll be all right. Shop. I mean, Will Smith, I brought up at 4,400 on DK. I was building a 3-max thing, finishing it out with the Dodgers. Again, you don't probably need to go that deep in a 3-max for sure, but probably put that in like the 11 or the $3.33. I'll have a couple of those stacks as well over on the old FanDuel. By the way, we've got Jake Hari hanging out there. I saw he just had a nice takedown in the old baseball street. So congrats to him as well. There we go. That was enough stalling by me. Jake Hari, congratulations. But Yasmani Grandal, 5,300. You want to talk about a contrarian spend up to be a little different? Oh, he's pulling 12.7% ownership now. Maybe not going that direction as much. Will Smith is the guy I'll give you for tournaments. 4,400 for him. I think it's pretty tough also not to have exposure to Sal Perez, considering all the dude does is mash home runs.
Yeah, so he is my number 3 overall. I think he's pretty reasonable from a cash perspective. For me, I think Gary Sanchez would be the guy, unless I needed to save a little bit more salary. Yan Gomes is the guy pulling the most ownership, but Gary Sanchez is my highest ranked catcher. He's one of 4 catchers in double digits in ownership. So that combination would likely lead me to get to Gary Sanchez from a cash perspective. Danny Jansen at 2,900 at 6% ownership would be my preferred GPP option. Although I've been talking long enough to get to 960 in lineups. I'm just about done. We're perfect. Please give me your cash opinions.
I was going to say Yan Gomes is going to be my cash game pitcher on DK, or my cash game catcher on DK. Excuse me.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to mumble a little bit until this just about finishes.
Yada, 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 yada,
perfect.
Yada, yada. There you go.
Copy. I'm trying here, people. I'm trying. And button click. We're in. Red Sox lineup updated. Astros lineup updated. And we are on to first base. Cash and GPP. Best options. Go.
I mean, you're playing Rizzo in cash. There's no other option but Anthony Rizzo in cash. He's 3,800. You play Anthony Rizzo in cash. For tournaments, you have a lot more options at your behest. I'm going to go a little bit different from where I think other people are going. I do this every single slate, but I'm going to get to more Soto. I'm going to get to more Josh Bell. Josh Bell, your tournament option for the old DK machine.
I completely agree with you. Rizzo pulling the most ownership. He is also my highest ranked first baseman. So no problem at all going to Rizzo in cash games, but the GPP one feels great. No problem whatsoever making this one happen. My GPP option is Vlad Guerrero Jr. Obviously a crisp 6,100, but only
you
9%
somehow
owned.
ate more chalk than me in one sentence.
He's 9% owned.
That's still so nuts. I mean, yesterday he was such an easy plug and play. It was beautiful.
Seems to be 11. As well today, as far as I know.
Yeah, under 11% for Vlad. That's fun times yesterday.
Second base. This one's trickier. All 4 guys in double digits in ownership. Those guys are making up 62% of second base ownership. They are my top 4 as well. So I'm curious to know where you're going here.
Yeah, Josh Harrison's my cash game guy. So I've got him. I've got Yan Gomes. That's my Oakland exposure against Scooble. 3,600 allows me to play Giolito, allows me to play Brandon Woodruff, and I can kind of lock those 2 in for the old cash game purposes. I feel good about that. I understand if you want to go Polanco and Simeon, but paying up some other spots. Hard to not get some exposure to Brandon Lau this in any spot here. And Brandon Lau, again, just continuing to hit home runs. What an absolute revelation that dude is, going up against a righty period Brad Peacock here. Give me Brandon Lau.
No issues with Harrison. Again, like I said, he's in my top 4. I think that I'd have an easier time spending the extra $300 and going to DJ LeMahieu. I have him a little bit higher. They're both getting ownership. But if I really needed the money, dropping to Harrison's not going to change anything for me. My preferred GPP option would be $2,700 Yanni Hernandez, 4% owned. I have him at 8. That is the biggest gap between my sim and our current projected ownership.
Love it.
To third base we go. You know the question.
Oh, yeah. So third base for Cascio Moncada, just too cheap, 4,200 for him in this spot. Pretty simple for me, straightforward. If you wanted to go Josh Donaldson, 3,900, I was kind of toying back and forth with him, but I've got some FanDuel exposure to him, so I don't feel so bad about it. DraftKings, third base, Josh Donaldson, probably a little bit overowned from where I would want to go there. Jose Ramirez going up against Jake Junis, who's kind of had some issues, 6,200. You want to get different in tournaments, get up, pay for him in third base, play him as a one-off, play him as a combo with, the usual suspects of Zimmer, Reyes, those such dudes, Franmil Reyes again, just everybody against Jake Junis, party with some Cleveland as well.
This one's really weird. The top 3 guys in my model are all the same. and their ownership is 11%, 13%, 11%. That would be Luis Arias, Yoan Moncada, and Josh Donaldson. So whatever works for you from a financial aspect of building that lineup out, I think all three guys are basically the same person for today. Yanni Hernandez was my answer on the last position, so I'm not going to give that same answer. Still works, though. Still the same 8% against a 4%er. After that, it kind of falls off. I don't have a very natural GPP option. I either see a couple guys that are over-owned or everybody is sort of where they should be. So the only name that I haven't said that's near the top of my list is Kevin Smith, and he is properly owned at 2,200.
All righty. I like it.
Do
Kevin
you
Smith.
like OddsShopper, by the way?
You know what? I love OddsShopper, actually, because I think it's the best place to go shop for your lines. And that's the number one way to be a profitable sports bettor.
It really is. You do not want to leave any money on the table by missing out on a better line. And these lines are moving every single second of the day. So no matter what you're betting on, whether that's sides, totals, player props, team props, we have it all at OddsShopper, and it allows you to shop around very easily. You just click a quick button and you're there. You get to see every line clear across the board. Not only that, but for our MLB player props, we have expected ROI and expected win probability numbers on all of them. It's all the same sort of information that's coming for our MLB DFS projections, just transitioning it to sports betting. By the way, don't think we mentioned this from the beginning. This is free. It's not costing you anything. You should absolutely be using this tool because the worst case scenario here is that nothing changes. There is no downside. You can set alerts for line movement. You can shop around and immediately get to the lines that you need. And we've got the data to back it up for individual props. It's not going to get much better than that. Don't leave money on the table. Make sure you're shopping around for your best line. Use OddsShopper to do it. You're walking right into that one. That was perfect.
Yeah, we've done enough shows together now at this point. Also, we're at 375 likes, so it gave me something else to think about other than another bite of chalk at 500.
Yeah, 125 more likes, and my co-host will eat another chunk of chalk today. A sentence that I never knew that I would speak.
I will never get another job ever again. I mean, people are going to find this on the internet, and it's just whatever. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so far I've only eaten a spicy chip and pizza bites. I could probably be okay with that. Nobody's going to be like, oh, there must be something wrong with him. Chalk. People start asking questions. I ate food, so that's a little bit different. Well, favorite shortstop from a cash and GPP perspective?
All right, so I played Harrison. You can play Harrison at the shortstop position if you want. I went Bo Bichette. He's carrying the most ownership. I think that's a pretty straightforward way. I wanted to get some Toronto exposure. We're going to talk about Springer next. So obviously this is my first piece. Vlad, you liked from a tournament perspective, if you can get up to him in cash on DK, fire away at 6,100. I just could not. So Bo Bichette, 5,300. I can get some exposure there. In tournaments, I think there's a number of ways you can go. I don't really like punting this spot because it seems like there's a lot of power that can exist, whether it's Story, whether it's, there's some savings in Jake Cronenworth, 4K for him as well. But Xander Bogaerts is getting completely underowned, underneath 1% right now, 5,800. If you want to get your contrarian spend up, that's the way to go for me against Ryan Yarborough. Why not?
I'm with you on Bo Bichette. He is my number one guy by a mile. He's also the highest owned. So if you are able to get to Bo Bichette, go for it. I think Josh Harrison is probably the preferred pay down option. For me, Trevor Story, 5,700 also works as a really nice GPP play. If you need a slight savings, $3,100 Nicky Lopez. And I think Cantor, it may be dead. Did he fall onto his keyboard or stroke out or something? Because that's not awesome. 1-year-old wanted to say what's up to the crew. Yeah, it was just a lot of mishmash numbers and stuff in chat. Didn't look great. All right, well, one more position to go. That would be outfield. The floor is yours on however many dudes you want to mention for either cash or GPPs.
Well, you play Buxton and Springer in cash. I'll give you two of them. They're free squares, so to speak. They're 3,200 and 4,800. Buxton, it's so hard. I'm going to cut that ownership in half and just cap him at 15% because I can't get to 35% of a dude on a 14-game slate, no matter if he's still, which he is, my favorite baseball player in all of Major League Baseball. Luis Robert, another guy, 18% for him. I think in cash, 4,200 for him. That is way too low of a number leading off here against Pittsburgh. fire him up as well. But you want to start talking tournaments. I think Max Kepler, if you're trying to get some Twins exposure, 6% is just kind of wrong for him. If you're going to look at a chalk your Twins team and you don't have Kepler when he's underneath 6% here, you're probably doing it wrong. You need to kind of incorporate him in everything you're doing. Mookie Betts against the Dodgers, or for the Dodgers, excuse me, going up against Atlanta. A guy that I'm just going to expect him to start coming to life here again. Yesterday, he ended up hitting a solo shot, which was good to see. But, he struggled a little bit since he got back here. But it's still Mookie Betts. And eventually you're going to be like, man, I should have played him when he was 1%. So getting to some Dodgers, I talked about liking that. There are so many places to go. I mean, it's not going to shock you to say, oh, you should play some Tatis, but he's 10.5%. So I'd rather get a little bit lighter on him. I go to some Yordan Alvarez there at 5,900. He's 0.5% owned right now. That's just kind of wrong as well. And Starling Marte, my favorite one off pretty much every single day of the week from Oakland, but Oakland, I do like stacking up here in this spot. 5,800 for him as well. If you can find a way to get to him, I believe the first player to ever steal 20 bags in the American League and National League in the exact same year.
Ooh, I did not know that.
There you go.
Springer and Buxton, I agree, are lock plays from a cash game perspective. Lou Bob probably pretty close to that as well. A couple other guys pulling some comparable ownership. Guys that I'm looking at that I think are under-owned. Giancarlo Stanton at 4,800. Sign me up there. Aaron Judge too, I guess, but 5,500. Then we get to Raimel Tapia, 4,300. No ownership to speak of at all. Lourdes Gurriel, 4% owned. I think it should be 8. Charlie Blackmon, 1% owned. I think it should be 6. These are some of the guys that stand out most for me from an outfielder perspective. Now, though, at 387 likes, I don't think the push is going to be there. So you're dodging the proverbial chalk bullet for today. Who's your dong pick? Who is going yard on today's slate?
Jose Ramirez is going to go yard against Jake Janis. That's not too tough of a pick, I think.
Not to me. Let's see where I have him.
Should we have like a super expensive dude, a mid-range dude, and a cheapie?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I have him 38th. I think you're fine just in general. Okay. I think there's also just a staggering amount of power at the top. Like if I started reading off some of these names, it's not like you'd be shocked to hear that like Aaron Judge ranks highly against Jaime Barria.
That is shocking, I tell you. Shocking.
So yeah, I'm more than okay with a Jose Ramirez pick. I mean, that's fine. Spags used to just try to take Giancarlo Stanton every day. So, there's also that. I'm going to take a guy that's getting no ownership right now. Literally 0 ownership for this guy. And he's number 2 in my model. How crazy is that?
It's crazy.
Shohei Ohtani.
Okay, that's absurd. He's 0.5%. I didn't even know that. He always ends up being like, even yesterday, I thought he was going to be like 1%. He ended up being like 5%
today. He literally cannot be rostered today. He was supposed to pitch, and now he's not pitching. So he's in as a pitcher, and we'll recruit 0 hitting stacks.
We're back to that. So crap. Awesome.
My pick is just a fake pick for right now. For a real pick, however, I'm going to go to the guy that is 8th in my model, not pulling any ownership. I'm excited for it. You mentioned him when the lineup dropped. I will take Hunter Renfroe.
I just mouthed it with you. Yeah. Hunter Renfroe. I like it a lot. I'm going to get to some exposure of him for sure. Him against any lefty period. And now leading off here, I'm surprised more teams don't do this where it's like Hunter Renfroe, like if you were to bat cleanup, Ryan Yarborough, like he's probably only going to get through the lineup twice here in this spot. Like, why wouldn't you want to just make sure your guy Renfroe sees him twice, no matter what? Like, you just give yourself the opportunity to have your best lefty killer just at least get those at bats then, as opposed to waiting on it later, getting a righty coming in out of the pen and just kind of screwing over your best hitter from the right side. It just always confused me.
I'm with you. And that is why I'm going to Hunter Renfroe as my dong pick. I don't know how we managed to have you eat chalk for like 5+ minutes. We are through everything. We're through top stacks. We're through top pitching options. We went through every single position individually. We flew through this and we still have 12 minutes to go until lock, which means if you are in premium Slack, get your questions in. If you are in YouTube chat, get your questions in. And it has been confirmed that Johnny Cueto is starting for The Giants as well. That is
Saw that come
confirmed.
through. Yep, that's true.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that people realized that information. That's for sure. Well, let's start getting some questions. Best 3,700 or less outfielder. That's coming from
Buxton.
Asobi.
I mean, if you're looking for somebody that's not chalky, you have a million different options to look for, but the answer is only Byron Buxton.
Do you know how to look for someone that isn't chalky?
Today? No, absolutely not. I am one with the chalk. Chalk is me. Me is chalk.
All righty. Let's see. 15, call that 16, I guess. I'm going to run a new little sim here. I didn't put Cueto in previously, so not that I'm all like worried. I don't expect this to change anything for me, but I do like being accurate with whatever I have in front of me. I'm a stickler for that kind of thing.
Blow it up. Start over.
Let's see. Any more questions in here from Premium Slack? No. Boy, oh boy, YouTube, are you about to get lucky? Would Cueto be a good pivot in that price range for large field GPPs?
No, not on this slate, I don't think.
No, that's not a direction that I think is very necessary.
Pull him up here too. Trevor Williams, man, if Trevor Williams goes off now at 1%, we're gonna hug it out in old North Carolina one day. My God,
it sounds good.
Do it.
Oliver Trevor Williams, definitely a man that's never caused anyone to hug someone else.
Yeah, I was gonna say, welcome to our screwed up little world where that is the only way that happens.
We did get a question from Joseph, just generally speaking, but with the question weather. Light rain in Kansas City, light rain in Chicago. Philly, Washington is scary-ish in that it's Washington and they don't ever seem to have a rhyme or reason for what happens when it comes to weather. Mm-hmm. So keep your eyes peeled for it. It is
Loco
going to
City
rain.
Wasn't worried, so I feel good about it.
Works for me.
Yep.
Those are the only spots where you have to at least even think about it. So I'm not treating it any differently. I'm not changing any of the postponement risk data or anything in my sheet. I'm moving forward like everything's good to go. All righty. Oh, here we go. Snell in cash. I think it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine, but I'm not going to do it.
I would guess Giolito is a cash game lock. On DraftKings, there is no choice. He is in your cash game lineup. I think the second spot is in between Blake Snell and Brandon Woodruff. And that's really just going to depend on what the rest of your lineup ends up looking like.
Yep. That's fact. How much White Sox are you getting to? Because I'm starting to get to the more closer we're getting here, they're so negatively leveraged, but it seems like they can kind of fit as like a bunch of 2 and 3 mans here. Robert was sneaking into just about everything I was doing here a second ago. I'm kind of muting him down. Grandal was popping in at everything, 5.3K. I'm surprised his ownership's as high as it's been. Obviously, he came out of the gate running. But for the season, it's definitely been a down year on the whole for Yasmani Grandal. I guess he's hitting over 200 now. He was down to like 170 when he got back off the IL here. 17 homers now, been warm. 48 fantasy points, I suppose. Your first game back will do that for you.
So for me, on the White Sox, they're a team that I will nerf completely from a 5-man perspective. Happy to have any of these guys as filler, particularly in like some non-chalky stacks, which is basically any non-Blue Jays or Yankees stack for me. So I don't mind filling out with the White Sox, but they are not a priority of mine from a individual 5-man perspective.
Yeah, I'm trying to nerf him down here too. We got 7 minutes. I got enough time. And plus that game, that game is until 5:10, I believe. So yeah, 5:10 out here, 8:10 your time, I guess.
I was just going to say, stop using these made up times.
It's still light out. What year is it?
Jeremiah Johnson with the question, favorite stack on FanDuel for a single entry?
Favorite stack on FanDuel? Well, I mean, I've made my handful of lineups over there. The one that I want to go off, there's a number of like, there's so many ways that you can go on FanDuel. The pricing is always softer over there. That's not shocking to anybody. Just get away from the same Yankees and Toronto ownership that you have over there. I like going to Boston still, and they're under 1%. I like the Dodgers, who are under 1%. A lot of the times when you get these best offenses, Houston's under 1% as well over there, but they're a little bit more expensive on FanDuel. I think out of like the core grouping of teams, I really like getting to Cleveland on FanDuel. That's the team that I'm cheering for. I brought up Jose Ramirez a number of times here. Big part of what I'm doing, where you can play 2 third basemen, you can play him, Devers, get very, very different there. Austin Gomber also came up for me a lot more on FanDuel, and I think I'm going to kind of ride with him there. I don't have a lot of him on DK, a lot of concerns where he's just a little bit higher owned there, but I think getting 6 with 6 Ks and getting some access to some bats, at least his price point's a little bit cheaper over there. That ownership, let's see where he's coming in at. Double check on the top pitchers tool. Austin Gomber coming in 12.4% ownership. He's going over owned there too, but most of these top end pitchers are over owned compared to their top pitcher percentage on FanDuel. It's all underneath 10% for everybody. So I think I'm going to ride with a little bit more of him over there.
Based on our top stack tool, Oakland, 4th highest top stack odds, neutral leverage. That would probably be one of the first couple spots that I was going to look, just based on what we've got on the site for today.
Love it.
DKGPP, A's and Yankees stacks, Pinder Judge or Marte Gardner.
Anything with Gardner, I don't want. So we're going to just go away from that.
I have Gardner as a negative leverage option in the 8 hole. We're going to prefer going to Judge. And if I look at the A's quickly, 3, so that's, the hell do they play? Tigers, Jesus. If I look at the Tigers, Pinder hitting 7th. Yeah, I just want the Judge side of that.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, that feels a lot better. Not that I don't, and like, I like Marte, but I like Judge more than Marte. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, back to YouTube. Now that all came from premium Slack. How much John Gant y'all get to? Precisely 0.
None. Not a damn share. John Gant's parents wouldn't roster John Gant. They know what's happening.
Yeah, that one's not for me. Best pitcher for FanDuel cash.
So, I mean, I was toying around with this, and I kind of have to make a decision within the next 4 minutes here. I've got 2 different builds. One is Giolito. One is McCullers. I'm going to go Giolito.
Yeah, I think Giolito is probably the safest option here. I think McCullers is fine. The problem with FanDuel is that all of this is fine.
You're picking straws. For me, it comes down to what are the bats that you really want to prioritize there. Ryan Zimmerman, he's 2,500 over there, batting 5th. I think that at least helps me be okay with kind of plugging that in. That's kind of a weird guy that we haven't brought up. Josh Bell, where you're playing one first baseman over on DK is definitely the priority, but on FanDuel, 2.5K allows me to get the savings off of him. I would like to get to the combination of Buxton or of Vlad and another guy, but it's a little bit more difficult. 4,500 for him. Yeah, you can kind of plug and play him if it works for you, but I'd like my build a little bit more without him. And looking at this lineup with Giolito, I'm just going to roll with this.
3 minutes to go, probably a little bit less than that. Are your lineups good? We got 2 minutes. Are you in? Are you locked and loaded? Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I was going to say, I could just randomly talk about nonsense for 2 more minutes if I needed to. Bean Dude says NFTs suck. Congrats on being poor then, I guess.
You got to be real better. Shit, I forgot to get in the drop. Part 4. I got the first.
Oh man,
one.
I would have been close on this one. I'm 466 in line. I would have had a legit shot on this one. I got 2 of them so far.
You got 2. I got 1.
Largely worthless from what I can see.
Yep, enjoyable.
I got Platinum and Emerald, and they are, let's see, selling for $35 and $62. So basically neutral. So hopefully she wins gold in 4 years.
That sounds great. Yeah. I mean, what am I going to do with my $12 NFT otherwise?
I don't know.
There's not much to do. Just hang on.
Get Jeter next week. I don't even know if I can bring myself to do it.
Oh, yes, you can. Stop it. You're buying wizards in the streets. Like you can definitely get a Derek Jeter. That's fine.
I'm buying nuts, man. But yeah, I mean, if I can get Jeter, I will get Jeter. I just won't be happy about it. I will happily sell that because I want nothing from him ever in life other than to pad my bank account.
Okay. Well,
I will only always hate him. I hate him so much that my contact picture for one of my best friends is him screaming in agony when he slid into third and separated his shoulder to start that season. It's been his contact picture on my phone since the moment it happened when I got my original iPhone.
Oh my God.
We're talking 2009, I believe, the beginning of the 2009 season. So 12 years ago.
You're a bad person, but also all we do is work with Yankees fans. I mean, we have 48 of them, it feels like, on staff. So whatever.
They are an insufferable group that I hate more than just about any other team on the planet. Eagles, Phillies, Yankees. Those three at the top of the heap for all things sports.
We definitely get along there. For me, it's definitely Yankees, Eagles. And I mean, some people think that I'm supposed to hate the Packers. I just hate Aaron Rodgers. I really don't hate the Packers.
Love
Aaron Rodgers.
Relax.
Just saying.
Anyway, on that note, we are done. We are locked. Thank you guys for joining us. This was an epic show. Kicked off with a little bit of chalk. Never thought that I would see that happen, yet here we are. Eric, anything you need to plug before we leave?
Oh, have a good night, everybody.
There we go, guys. Thank you for joining us. Keep hitting that like button. If it gets to 500, I think it still counts. Anyway, we'll be back again tomorrow. You guys know the drill. Strategy show, deeper dive, live before lock, all that good stuff. Good luck tonight, everybody. Win your bets, win your DFS contests. We'll see you later.